So, are you feeling sad right now or frustrated with gaming? Or maybe just life isn't going really well? Maybe you're feeling lonely, maybe things aren't going well, or you just feel off. Well, today I wanted to recommend to you some amazing video games that are going to shock your system, to reinvigorate your passion for gaming, or at the very least, just give you some awesome video games to play. And this list will have something for just about everybody. And I wanted to talk about a wide variety of games, both popular games and kind of more niche titles. And there's so many video games that I wanted to put on this list, but I really wanted to focus on games that I think had a high chance of giving you a ton of fun. Video games that are shocking to your system and that are just going to bring you so much joy and fun. Some of the games on this list are not for everyone, but I still think that some of them you could have a great time with, and it might be worth taking a risk on them because you never know what games that you might really resonate with that you maybe wouldn't really consider playing. And there's plenty of games that I haven't included on this list just because there's so many video games to talk about. And if there's actually a video game that you want to recommend, please leave a comment below. I would really appreciate that so that you could share that with other people. And even if you have played some of these video games, I'm going to just be talking about these video games and we're just going to be having fun with it. It'll just be kind of this hangout session. So I want to not only recommend these games, but talk about them and just kind of have fun talking about games, hanging out and relaxing with whatever you're doing while listening to this video or watching this video. And so I'm really excited to talk about these games. I hope that I bring a ton of value to you. And at the very least, I hope that I give you at least one video game that's going to kind of just give you a ton of fun, a ton of just invigorated energy, and you're just going to have a ton of fun with. Maybe open your eyes up to so many other video games that you could possibly play. And so with all that being said, let's go ahead and get started. So the first video game that I wanted to talk about today is Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. And I love this game. This is an amazing RPG. I actually think this is the best Star Wars game ever made. And that's saying something. And I know a lot of people like Star Wars Battlefront 1 and Battlefront 2. I love those games too, the originals, by the way. But Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, in my opinion, is the best Star Wars game ever made. And it's an amazing RPG. It's got an awesome story, a great cast of characters, and I think it really embodies Star Wars. But I think what makes this game really special is that people kind of have this perception about what a Star Wars game is, especially with kind of the kind of more, modern Star Wars games. But this game is just so good. There's so many twists and turns that it's just very surprising. I mean, I was surprised when I played this game originally a long time ago. I was surprised at how good this game is. And I almost kind of don't want to talk about it because it's so good to go in not knowing anything at all. I don't really want to talk about the story. I don't want to talk about the characters because if you just kind of go in not knowing anything, you're going to have so much of a better time. And like I said, the cast of characters are so good. There's a droid character that's absolutely awesome. Bastila is an amazing character. It's so fun. Now, I will say that this game also kind of goes back to this kind of old school RPG style of things. And so the combat system in this game is maybe a little off-putting for some people. It's kind of like, I suppose, I'm not even really sure how to put it, but it's kind of got like this turn-based, slightly real-time focus of things. So it's not like your modern Star Wars games. That's probably the only thing that I would say kind of throws people off, but don't let that dissuade you because everything is so good in this game. Even the combat, for what it is, I think is a lot of fun. And the story and the characters and the world building and all those things are so fun. They're so amazing. I cannot recommend this game enough. And honestly, it's actually got as a random aside, it's got one of the most fun card games of all time in any video game. There's a game called Pazak that you play during the game, and it's so fun. That game, that mini game, the card game is so fun, so amazing. And there's actually a second Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. So if you do like this game, you can play the second game in the series. Now, I think the first one is the best. The second one is also really, really, really good. But it's just a great RPG. I mean, even if you're really not an RPG gamer, this is just a fun game. And to be honest with you, I think that it actually could get you excited to play other RPGs. Or if you're a Star Wars fan and for some reason you haven't played Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, you really owe it to yourself. I mean, this game is good. This is a really, really, really good game. It's a ton of fun. And even if you're not a Star Wars fan, I think that it's a ton of fun as well. There's just like something about this game where I'm not going to say that the game is like dark and gritty, but it's kind of more in that direction. And I think that's something that's missing in a lot of modern role-playing games. And so if you haven't played this game, you're just in for a treat. it's so amazing. I mean, like I said, I keep repeating myself, but it's just so good. I cannot recommend this game enough. Another thing too, you really start off kind of in the early stages of not even being a Jedi. And so you have to kind of work towards getting your lightsaber and building it up from there. And so that kind of throws people off. But I actually love this idea because you have to kind of earn being a Jedi. And so eventually when you kind of do get a lightsaber and stuff like that, and this is not really spoilers, you feel it. You feel that progression. And so I will say that and the combat system, I think, throw people off just a little bit. But like I said, if you can get past those two things, this is an amazing game. You'll have a wonderful and fun experience with it. And so, like I said, I think Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic is the best Star Wars game ever made. And like I said, if you like it, you'll probably really enjoy the second game, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 2. And just as a random aside, because we're just talking about video games, right? I want to not only recommend video games, but I want to just talk about games, just have a hangout session with this stuff. But, the MMORPG, Star Wars The Old Republic, I have problems with that game as an MMORPG, but some of these single player stories are actually a lot of fun. So a lot of people like the Imperial Agent story in Star Wars The Old Republic or the Bounty Hunter story. And I've actually had a lot of fun playing through some of those stories. Now, as a core MMO, I think that Star Wars The Old Republic has its problems. But if you do like Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic and you like the second game, maybe check out the MMO. It's free to play. And so you can play through some of those stories and actually kind of get something similar to Knights of the Old Republic as well. So there's 3 games that you can have a ton of fun with. But regardless, that's just me kind of rambling over on this other video game. But Knights of the Old Republic, if you're looking for a great RPG, great cast of characters, great story, look no further than this game. Okay, so next up is Outer Wilds. Now, this is the game that you're not supposed to talk about. And I actually have a video on this where I try to talk about this game without any spoilers. And so I'll try to kind of repeat myself. But if you want to check out that video, I'll link it up above or in the description of this video. But this is an extremely unique video game experience. This is some people's favorite video game of all time. And so that should make you pause for a second, right? If people say, wow, this is my favorite video game of all time, should make you pause for a second. And it really is an extremely unique experience. I would say that it's really hard to get something similar to this in another video game. And the less that you know about this game, the better. I would really just try not to look up stuff because there are spoilers around. And I think that if you go in not knowing anything, you'll have a better time going into it. But it's a very immersive game. And if you do decide to give the game a try, which I think you should just kind of take a risk if you are open to it. But try not to look up a guide if you can. The experience will be a lot better if you just kind of try to overcome some of the challenges, but it's in a very immersive game. It's a very unique experience. And I know that that's just not saying much, but like I said, the less that you know going in, the better. I had heard about this game when it kind of originally came out. And so eventually I decided to play it, and I just went in completely not knowing anything. I really didn't know anything. And it turned out to be an amazing experience for me. And a lot of people will echo those sentiments. And I'm sure that there's people that have played this game that have had similar experiences. If you've had an awesome time playing Outer Wilds, leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts about it. But I know that this is a weird way to recommend a video game, but it's just like I said, it's one of those games you're not supposed to talk about it because it's so unique. And so many people really wish that they could go in and forget their memories about this game and play it over again. And honestly, I feel similarly to it. So really, if you're open to something that's kind of a little bit exploration minded, it kind of taps into this childlike curiosity of just exploration and trying to figure things out. Give Outer Wilds a try. And like I said, I don't want to talk about the game because I think it's best appreciated not knowing anything. So if you're willing to take a risk, check it out. And I hope you enjoy it. It's a really cool experience. Like I said, you won't find many video games quite like it. And give the game a try if you're open to it. All right, next up, I'm excited about this one, and it is Chrono Trigger. Now, I love this game. This is an amazing game, and this is a lot of people's favorite video game of all time, and it's actually a lot of people's favorite JRPG of all time. And let me tell you, this is an awesome video game, and it's an awesome JRPG. Now, I think for a lot of people, it depends on who you are, they're not really into JRPGs, and I get it. There's a lot of kind of anime and manga tropes that people don't really like. They think that this is just not their kind of style of game. But if there was ever a video game to get you into JRPGs, in my opinion, it would be Chrono Trigger. I think it's a great intro into Japanese role-playing games. But not only that, though, it's just a great game in general. And even if you don't like JRPGs or it doesn't get you into JRPGs, I think you could have a ton of fun with this game. And this game is an extremely optimized and polished game. It's an old game, but there's no fat on the bone with this video game. It is extremely tight. It's just go, go, go to the very end. There's not really any filler in this game, and I really mean it. And it's actually a pretty short JRPG, all things considered. I'd probably say it's probably around maybe 20 to 30 hours. It's been a while since I've played Chrono Trigger, but somewhere around that length. And it's got an amazing story, an amazing cast of characters, an awesome soundtrack. And I mean an awesome soundtrack. And it's just a ton of fun. Now, I would say that probably the most dated thing about Chrono Trigger is the combat system. It's kind of your classical turn-based kind of style JRPG combat system. But even though it is kind of an old school turn-based combat system, surprisingly, at least to me, it's still a lot of fun for what it is. But I think that beyond just the combat system, it's just the story and the characters and the music that really make this game so special. I mean, the soundtrack is so good. So like when you enter the game, there's like a fair and there's a song, Guardia Fair, and it's so good. I mean, that game just gets you pumped for this game. Like you listen to that song and you go, okay, I'm in for this awesome journey and experience. And then there's Gato's song, which is kind of like right next to the fair. Awesome song as well. I could just nerd out about the music in so many video games. I actually kind of want to make a video about video game music because I love video game music, but I don't know if anyone would find that interesting. If you want me to make that video, let me know in the comment section. But regardless, this is a really awesome game in terms of just a story-based game. It's so approachable from a JRPG perspective because it does everything so right. And like I said, a lot of people consider it their favorite video game of all time or their favorite JRPG, and it really is that good. And you know, the thing is too, a lot of people will say, oh, this is just nostalgia talking. No, I promise you, this game has aged extremely well. And there's a lot of people that actually played this game when it was not released originally on the Super Nintendo, and they played it later on in life as an adult, and they love the game, or it became their favorite game of all time. That's saying something. So when you kind of hear things like that, when people talk about them saying, oh, this is my favorite video game of all time, or I love the soundtrack or the characters, it should make you pause. And I think you should really give Chrono Trigger a try, even if you're not into this genre. And if you're really into JRPGs like Final Fantasy and stuff, and you haven't played Chrono Trigger, what are you doing? Give this game a try. It's so good. It's so good. And at the very least, you know, you're going to get an awesome soundtrack from it. But I really do think you'll enjoy it. It's a great introduction into JRPGs like Final Fantasy and stuff like that, because this game is very approachable. There actually is another Chrono game called Chrono Cross, which a lot of people like. I don't like Chrono Cross as much as Chrono Trigger. I am one of those people. Some people would say Chrono Cross is better than Chrono Trigger, but I do like Chrono Trigger better. I am one of those people. I think that's the kind of more popular take, to be honest with you. But Chrono Cross is a lot of fun too. A lot of people really enjoy it. So if you like Chrono Trigger, you might enjoy Chrono Cross afterwards. And Chrono Cross has an awesome soundtrack too. I mean, even for the faults that people have with Chrono Cross, people love the soundtrack. It's got an amazing soundtrack. And that's what I really like about JRPGs, and in particular like Chrono Trigger and stuff. I mean, the soundtracks are so good. They're so memorable. I mean, they stick with you years later. And I wish like a lot of modern games, especially Western games, had these kind of soundtracks that are memorable where there's like a boss theme or a zone theme and it just sticks with you. Because those tracks, they add to the tension of the game. They add to your emotional resonance with the game. That's what I love about these kind of games. And so many Western studios just don't, they have this just forgettable soundtrack, or it's just lazy. And so with Chrono Trigger, it's just, I cannot praise the soundtrack enough. And so many people would agree with me on that. Of course, it's got like I said, a great cast of characters. My favorite character in the game is Frog, who's literally a frog. I won't talk about it because I don't want to spoil anything. But he's got a great story in the game, and all the cast of characters are so good. They're so well done. So anyways, give this game a try. Even if you're not into JRPGs, I think you might really like it. It's a lot of people's favorite video game of all time. And I think you could have a really amazing experience with it. Okay, so next up, we have Subnautica. And I love Subnautica. Subnautica is an amazing video game. And like some of the other video games that I recommended, it's best to go in not knowing anything at all with this game. And this game is so immersive. It's basically a game where you crash land on a planet covered in water, and you have to get off the planet or figure out what's going on. And that's all I'll say about the game. And it is a survival crafting game. So there's kind of crafting of base and getting better gear and stuff like that. But that's all I'll say about the game. But the game is so immersive. I mean, this is such an immersive video game, and it's really fun. And I think that as far as survival crafting games are concerned, this is a very approachable game. It's actually not too long of a game. It's not too grindy, and so it's very approachable. And so even if you've tried some survival games out there and it wasn't really your thing or you thought it was too grindy, give Subnautica a try. It's so fun. This is such a unique experience as well. It's really hard to get something like this somewhere else. And like I said, I don't want to talk about the game because the less that you know, the better. There's so many of these like twists and turns that happen in the game that are so surprising. And I went into the game not knowing anything at all. And I'm glad that I did that. And I know it's tempting because there's a lot of YouTuber and streamer reactions on it. And the game can be a little frightening, just using your imagination. But if you don't go in knowing anything, you'll have a better time. And this game is so fun. Like I said, if you don't like survival games, this is a great introduction, and it could actually get you into maybe other survival games just because it's so approachable. But even beyond the kind of survival crafting genre of things, this game is just, like I said, it's so immersive. I mean, I'm not even really afraid of the water at all, but like you look at the deep water and you can't see anything, and there's just this uneasiness with it. There's just something about this game's immersion and the way that you try to figure out what's going on and explore and understand things. It's just such a unique video game experience. And so I would highly recommend this game. And I'm going to try not to just talk in ambiguous terms with every single video game on this list. I apologize for that. But if I do talk in these ambiguous terms, it's because I really want you to have this awesome experience. I really do, because I really believe that if you go in not knowing anything, you're going to have a way better time. I mean, that's what I want to do. I want you to have an awesome time. I want you to have like an experience that's just memorable and it sticks with you. I really wish I could just forget my memories of this game and play it over a second time. And so that's why I'm kind of talking in these ambiguous terms. So I'm not going to do it with every single video game, I promise. This is a very unique experience. And even if it doesn't really sound compelling, I think it can be really resonating with you. And there actually is a second Subnautica coming out. We'll see how it does, but regardless, Subnautica is an amazing experience. Not only is it just so immersive, but it's unique. It's very unique. You won't get other video games quite like it, and for what it does, it's extremely well done. Definitely give Subnautica a try. I think you can have a ton of fun with this game and an extremely unique experience. Okay, so for this next one, I'm going to try to convince some people. So wish me luck, Sunbros, but it is Dark Souls. Now, a lot of people love this game series, and a lot of people are very opinionated about it. Some people definitely think that this is not for them, but I'm going to try to convince you to play these video games. And if there was actually one game I would recommend in the whole series, I would recommend start with Dark Souls 1. Now, some people would suggest Elden Ring. I can understand that, or Dark Souls 3, but I'm going to pick the classic Dark Souls 1. Some people would also say Demon Souls, but I just think that it's probably a little bit easier to play Dark Souls 1, so that's what I'm going to suggest, okay? There's a lot of starting points that you could pick with this game series. So before I kind of talk about why you should play this game, basically it's one of these games where you have a character, you have a bunch of stats like an RPG, and you basically go through a bunch of areas and you fight monsters and you fight bosses and you try to reach the end of the game. So you level up your character, you get some gear, you increase your stats, you maybe become more magic focused, or you're focused on strength or health or things like that, and you kind of go through the area. That's the core idea of Dark Souls. Now, why should you play this game? Because I think a lot of people, they look at Dark Souls and they go, well, this is not for me. I don't want to play a game that's extremely difficult or it's very frustrating. They've seen the rage compilations of other YouTubers, or they've heard about the difficulty and those things. Maybe they've given Elden Ring a try or something like that. It wasn't for them. They've given these games a try. It wasn't for them. Well, let me explain it to you in this way. So what makes Dark Souls really unique is that it's an extremely immersive game, and it really taps into these kind of really core human emotions that make you have this really emotionally resonating experience with a video game. So it really taps into overcoming adversity, because the game is not easy. It's very challenging. And I know that a lot of people, they've played all the Dark Souls games and they go, well, it's not that hard. But I think for a lot of outsiders, it is hard. So I want to be fair. And at the same time, too, it's not nearly as hard as people make it out to be. I think a lot of it comes down to changing the way that you play, because there's so many video games that are so easy now and you kind of just rush in, you hack and slash through, and you don't think about things. And with Dark Souls, you have to be a little bit more patient, a little bit more thoughtful. And I actually have a whole video about how to get into Dark Souls, which I go into this in more detail. If you want to check it out, I'll link it up in the description or up above if you're interested. But it kind of requires a little bit of a different change in the way that you think about things. But when you actually do overcome this area, or when you beat this boss, the feeling is just so amazing. It's so, it taps in beyond the video game, but also it just taps into this sense of exploration with these games. And so when you explore these areas, your mind is just so curious about what's going on. What's that castle off into the distance? What is the story behind this? And the storytelling in Dark Souls is so interesting because it's like this environmental storytelling. You're so curious about what's going on. What is this boss? What is this zone? What does this all mean? And you read some of the lore logs and or some of the descriptions on the weapons and stuff like that. And it's so immersive. But beyond that, because of the difficulty, it adds to things. So you have these checkpoints like bonfires in the game. And so you'll be going through this area and you haven't seen a bonfire in a while. You're really low on health and you're just wondering, okay, where's the next bonfire? And it adds to this tension. And you see this area off onto the side and you're going, well, I wonder what's over there. Should I risk it? And so then you risk it and you get into this ambush encounter and you're freaking out. You're going, no, I don't want to go back. I don't want to go back. And it adds to this level of tension and immersion with a game that's just so hard for games to replicate that adds to things. And beyond that, there's just this cool sense of progression with your character, but the sense of progression with yourself where you get better at the game. And there's a lot of, I guess, people that it's kind of, I think, more funny than anything. They'll talk about, oh, get good. And I would say get good. But I think that a lot of people, they just mean it in jest. You know, it's just saying, don't let the game beat you, overcome it. Because there are a lot of moments in the game that are very frustrating and challenging. I won't lie about that, but it's just something that is such a unique gameplay experience and a fun experience. And you just want to try to take things slowly and easily. When I first played the Dark Souls games, I'll be honest with you, I didn't like it. I was playing and I said, this game sucks. I don't like it. And I kept going, even though I was like, this sucks. And something clicked for me and I fell in love. I think it was like, I was playing the game for like 30 minutes or 45 minutes. And then, like I said, I was saying, this game sucks. And then it clicked and I fell in love with it. And I think that's happened for a lot of people where their first experience with it was very difficult. It was very annoying, but you just keep with it and something clicks in you to keep going and have this awesome immersive experience. And so that's what I would say to convince you to play the Dark Souls games. So like I said, I would start with the first one and then just go with the second game and the third game. And then you can go into the other Souls games like Bloodborne or Elden Ring or whatever. And then of course, if you like Dark Souls, you're going to have dozens, if not hundreds of hours of gameplay time with all the other games. So if you like Dark Souls 1 or even Dark Souls 3 or whatever, you're going to like all the other Souls games. And it'll also open you up to other Souls-like games like Lies of P and stuff like that. So there's a ton of potential to get amazing video games. If you just try this game, you might love even more games and you'll have hundreds of hours of enjoyment. And these are awesome games. So you'll have amazing experiences with these games. And so, like I said, I would start with the classic Dark Souls 1, even though there's things about it that are rough around the edges, but I like the slower paced gameplay of the older Dark Souls games. And I'm going to defend it right now. Sorry, I have to do it, but I'm going to defend Dark Souls 2. I love Dark Souls 2. People give that game way too much hate. And I just think it's an awesome game. You know, I know that Dark Souls 2 has its problems, but you know, I don't care. I love the game. It's an awesome game. It's got the best home base theme of all the series, Majula, and it's got the best home base theme of all time, in my opinion. And it's actually got my favorite boss fight in the entire Dark Souls series, Fume Knight. I love Fume Knight as a boss. And let me know what your favorite boss is. If you're a big Dark Souls fan, I'd love to know who your favorite boss fight is in the game series. You know, and also if you really like the Dark Souls series, please, you know, write some comments below for people to maybe help them to get into Dark Souls, because I really love Dark Souls and all the Souls games. And so I'd love for people to share their thoughts about getting people to play these games, because I really do think a lot of people, they're intimidated by it. They go, this is not for me, and you'll really enjoy the game. And you know, just as a more fun conversational thing, I'd be also curious to know which boss fight in all these games that you struggle with the most. So for me, there's two boss fights in particular. So actually number 2 was actually from Elden Ring, which was Melania. drove me mad. And of course, I played all the games without summons, which I would also suggest you do. It's a better experience in my opinion. That might be a little elitist, but it's better to kind of overcome the challenges yourself rather than with summons. But so I beat all the games without summons, and so I was fighting her without summons, and man, that fight was just was brutal. That fight was just absolutely brutal. So I would say that's number 2, but actually that's not number 1 for me. But yeah, actually number 1 is Sister Fried from Dark Souls 3. That fight gave me so much rage. And I know I'm like probably not convincing people to play the Dark Souls games, but that boss gave me so much trouble in all the Souls games. I do not know what it was. To me, that's the hardest boss fight in all the series. I mean, probably Melania is harder, but just yeah, the Sister Fried fight, that fight is brutal. Honestly, those 3 phases. What's cool about these fights, by the way, and I know that all these people are going, what are these people talking about? But what's so cool about these fights is that, like, I know I'm like going, oh, this fight is hard and it's brutal, but it's part of the experience. And once you kind of do the boss over and over again, it's like this dance. It's like this dance that you fight these bosses with. And it's just like there's this air of elegance to the fight when you do it really well. And it's like this choreographed dance, like the Sur Alone fight in Dark Souls 1 or Fume Knight, or Gale, Mid-Deer, or all these other fights. There's just like this level of elegance to the fights. And so when you're fighting Sister Fried over and over again, like you kind of get to this level of elegance with the fight, which I really appreciate after the fact. But I had the most difficulty fighting her. I just don't know what it was, but I'd love to know what your hardest boss fight in all the Souls games was. Let me know in the comments. I'd love to know maybe one of your experiences about fighting that boss. But it was so awesome overcoming that boss fight originally. But anyways, give Dark Souls a try. There's a reason why so many people love Dark Souls. It's some people's favorite video game of all time. And if you don't want to play Dark Souls 1, Elden Ring is another great entry into the series, as is Dark Souls 3. I still think that Dark Souls 1 is the best, just for a bunch of maybe more technical reasons than anything. But even if you've liked Elden Ring, by the way, give Dark Souls a try. It's basically like the castle in Elden Ring, but over and over and over and over again. And that's why it's so amazing. I almost wish that Elden Ring was more of like the castle at the very beginning of the game than this kind of open world aspect. But that's a whole other topic about talking about Elden Ring and stuff like that. But anyways, Dark Souls, give it a try. It's so amazing. You can have an amazing experience with this game. All right, so next one. It's going to be a very popular game, and I'm almost tempted to not put this game on the list just because it's so well known. But I still wanted to recommend this game because it's so good that I have to recommend it, especially for the people that have not played this game. And it is Terraria. Now, if you haven't played Terraria, you're in for a treat, and you really owe it to yourself to play this game. Now, this game is so much fun. And basically, it's kind of this RPG open world crafting game where you kind of live in this world and you kind of get better gear, fight these bosses, and build a little house and progress basically those ways. That's the basic gist of Terraria. And Terraria has been kind of going on for a very long time, and a lot of people absolutely love this game. This is an extremely fun game. It's got a great soundtrack, by the way. It's really nice and peaceful and very cool, fun soundtrack. And this is actually a lot of fun as a co-op game as well. So if you have some people that you can play this game with, you can have an absolute blast with. But even if you don't, it's actually a great game solo as well. And there's a ton of content with this game. You probably could easily get a good 100 hours out of this game. And it really, I think, appeals to a lot of different people. So there's an RPG progression system where you get better armor. And then there's this kind of exploration where you're exploring the world and you're trying to figure out what's going on. And then there's kind of this crafting component of building your little house. And just the game is just so fun. And honestly, looking at this game, it just makes me want to replay it, to be honest with you. And I'm actually the kind of person that isn't the biggest fan of replaying games over and over again. And like even just like looking at the game again, it makes me want to play it over again. That should tell you how good this game is. This game is just so fun. I think that what Terraria does well is it just kind of really speaks to the very core fun aspects of video games. I mean, if we just talk about pure fun in terms of video games and just being fun, Terraria really nails it. And it really nails it with its aesthetic and its progression and exploring and beating things. And it's just so much fun. And like I said, especially if you have other people to play with, this game can be a ton of fun. Now, I know that there's the 2D graphics, and some people that maybe are a little bit more into immersive graphics, they go, well, this is not for me. This is just some random indie game or something. don't let the graphics fool you. This game is so fun. I mean, it really taps into that joy and enjoyment with the game. And you can get so many hours of gameplay out of this game. And so, especially too, like if you haven't played games like this and you have a lot of fun with Terraria, there are other games that are out there that have been inspired by Terraria that will easily give you even more time, a game time out of. So if for some reason you haven't played Terraria, you really owe it to yourself to give this game a try at the very least. It is so much fun. I mean, I really do believe it. It's so much fun. And like I said, I was tempted to not put this game on the list just because of how many people love this game and probably have recommended it. But I just felt like it was important to put it on this list just because I do think that it can really resonate with you. You can just have this amazing time. It just really can just bring joy to your heart. And like I said, there's got to be some people that haven't played this game. Play it. It's so good, so fun. Would really highly suggest it. Okay, and so for the next game, it's another popular one, but I think it's important to recommend, and it is Stardew Valley. Now, a lot of people have recommended this game, but still I wanted to talk about it because it is so good. And I also wanted to, I think, talk to the people that aren't really into these kind of farming simulator games or these kind of, I guess, termed cozy games. Because Stardew Valley is just such a calming and relaxing and such a well-crafted game, just crafted with such love and passion. This is an amazing game. And for the people that really aren't into these things, they go, well, I'm not really into these kind of farming simulators. This is not my kind of thing. I would still suggest give Stardew Valley a try, especially when you have like a long day. Life's just been really hard. Maybe you're really burned out, very mentally drained. Stardew Valley is a very calming and chill game. It's just a great game to kind of relax, to turn your brain off and just to enjoy the whole experience. It's got a great soundtrack, a really beautiful soundtrack. It's got very charming graphics, charming characters, and it's just very relaxing where basically you inherit your grandfather's old farm plot and you build a farm, but there's kind of more that goes into it. There's kind of a RPG system, there's exploration and stuff like that. It's not just building a farm, although that's one part of it. You can decorate your house and stuff like that. It's just a very calming game. And I think for some people, they look at that as a video game and they go, well, that's just boring. That's not for me. I would still suggest you give Stardew Valley a try. I think that it's probably a great introduction into this kind of genre of cozy games. And if you really like it, which you might be surprised with, there's a ton of awesome games that are out there that are like Stardew Valley that you really might enjoy. I think that this and probably Animal Crossing would probably be the two games that people would recommend of this kind of genre. But I would suggest Stardew Valley. And like I said, even if you think to yourself, I just am not into this, you might be really pleasantly surprised. I think that this game is just so calming, especially when you really don't want to think about things. You don't want to stress your mind out too much. You want to just calm down and relax. This is a phenomenal game, and it can really open you up to so many games that are kind of like this. There's just something about the feeling of kind of having this farm slowly get bigger over time, and you slowly accumulate more money to kind of decorate your house, and your character gets a little bit better. You get a little bit further in the game. It's just very satisfying and very calming and very at home. And there's no stress with this game. It's very pressure off. And so if you're looking for something that's just kind of very chill, very calming, it's a great game to play. And I would highly recommend it. I think that there's also multiplayer. I'm pretty sure. So if you have someone that you want to play with, that can be a lot of fun as well. But don't write off Stardew Valley because it is a farming simulator or a cozy game. You might actually enjoy it. I wanted to recommend games that would be a source of rejuvenation, especially like after a long day or when just things are really tough. And I think Stardew Valley accomplishes that. And I think it also exposes people to video games that they're not really familiar with. This is not what they would typically play. And it opens you up to video games that are different and that can bring you so many hours of enjoyment. And that's why I really wanted to talk about Stardew Valley and put it on this list. And so give this game a try. Very calming, very relaxing, very fun, highly recommended. Okay, so next one is another popular one, and it is Slay the Spire. Now, Slay the Spire is a ton of fun, and this game has inspired so many games like this, but it is a roguelike deck builder, and this game is just a ton of fun. Now, I think when some people look at this game, especially if you're not really too familiar with these kind of deck building games or these roguelike games, you might look at the graphics and the cards and you go, what is this? I'm not here to play a card game. I'm here to play a video game. Well, these games are a ton of fun and they're extremely challenging, but essentially you basically start at the very beginning and you have a deck of cards, and over time you go through these runs and you try to build your deck by adding cards or sometimes removing cards. Make your build stronger to fight bosses along the way until you reach the end of the run. And these roguelike games and Slay the Spire can be very, very, very challenging games. And they really challenge you to strategically think about how to overcome the challenges that are ahead of you. And the runs are random in terms of what you get along the way. And so Slay the Spire is, I think, for a lot of people, what they would recommend as a starting place and really as a gold standard for these kind of games. So if you've never really played something quite like this, you haven't played a deck builder or a roguelike game, Slay the Spire is an amazing choice. I mean, people absolutely love this game. I really like this game. This is an amazing game. And there's actually the second Slay the Spire coming out relatively soon, which a lot of people are really excited for, including myself. But in addition to this, I just have to say, Slay the Spire has a phenomenal soundtrack. I mean, an amazing soundtrack, and it's not even just really good songs. It almost kind of, I feel like, gets you in the into the aesthetic and the mood of the video game, which is kind of weird when you think about the cards and all those things, but it just, the tone and all those things, it just matches really well. You can get so many hours of gameplay out of Slay the Spire, and it really opens you up, I think, to so many other deck building games and roguelike games, especially if you haven't played these kind of games before. Now, I know that this is a very popular choice for the people that are into these type of games, but I really did want to bring it to people's attention that typically don't play these type of games. They typically don't play these games where you build a deck, you try to go through these kind of runs where it gets harder and harder, where you have to overcome these challenges. It's very unique and very fun, especially for the people that have never played these games. And so if you're not too familiar with roguelikes or deck builders, I would highly encourage you to try out Slay the Spire. And if you do like these kind of games and you haven't played the Slay the Spire for some reason, definitely play this game. It is so good. It is so well done. You can get so many hours of fun out of this game. But not only that, though, it introduces you to all these amazing video games that are like this. And that's what's so cool, because I really do believe that a lot of gamers, they kind of stick in their lane. They stick with the games that they're used to or accustomed to. And they hear about, oh, I've heard this game is very popular, very fun, and that's that. They just kind of leave it at that. But I would really encourage you to play Slay the Spire if you haven't played it. It really can open you up to a kind of new genre of video games, a new type of video game that is so much fun. Phenomenal soundtrack, by the way, and they're very challenging games. They make you think about things, and that's what I really appreciate about Slay the Spire in games like this, where you're not guaranteed to win. You have to think about things, and there's a level of skill involved. And so, for so many games that have this kind of yellow paint dynamic now, they're just so easy. These roguelike games, they challenge you. They challenge you to think. They challenge you to overcome the challenges in front of you, or to think about what's the best way to overcome things. For people that just are kind of tired of the easiness of video games and stuff like that, this is a great choice as well. So yes, definitely check this game out. Phenomenal soundtrack, phenomenal game. You can have a ton of fun with Slay the Spire. All right, I'm excited about this one. And this one's going to be pretty intimidating for a lot of people, but I'm going to try to convince people to give this game a try. And it is Stellaris. Now, you could put a lot of different Paradox games on this list. I'd almost say that this is the Paradox game recommendation. So there are many games like this. So there's Stellaris. That's the kind of more space-themed, futuristic version. Then there is EU4, Europa Universalis 4. That's a kind of more Renaissance exploration kind of time period of things. There's Hearts of Iron 4, which is the more World War II themed. There's Crusader Kings 3, that's kind of more medieval, more kind of RPG focused. There's Victoria 3. There's a bunch of different Paradox games that you could recommend. And honestly, I would recommend all of them. If one of them appeals to you more, just given the time period or something like that, I can totally understand it. But if I had to suggest one, I'm going to go with Stellaris. But essentially, they are these grand strategy games that are extremely complicated and they are extremely immersive. And I love these games. And one of the things that I really love about these games is that they're extremely complicated. They're very deep and they're very difficult at times. And I think that even for people that have played video games for a long time, these games are very overwhelming and they can really just chew out some of the most seasoned of gamers. But if you can get over the initial difficulty curve, get over the initial sense of overwhelmingness, you can have some of the most amazing times ever playing strategy games. And I think that for a lot of people that play strategy games, maybe they don't really like the direction that some strategy games have gone, especially when it comes to difficulty or AI or stuff like that. And I feel like that's when a lot of people kind of progress into the kind of grand strategy realm, these kind of more complicated strategy games. And so with these games, I think that they're very intimidating because a lot of people will have to like watch a bunch of YouTube tutorials to figure out things and stuff like that. But once you kind of get the hang of things, these games are a ton of fun. So what is Stellaris? So Stellaris is kind of this grand strategy game that takes place in space and in the future. And you form your own empire or colony, group of species, and you try to conquer the galaxy or survive within this galaxy. And so it lasts hundreds of years. And what makes this game so fun too is that it's immersive. It's so customizable. There's so many ways to kind of build into storytelling. It's not just about the strategic aspect of winning and just overcoming your enemies in space battles or overcoming enemies and just growing your empire larger. There's a storytelling and a lore aspect to it, which is why I kind of suggest Stellaris over the others, because it does that a little bit better than the other games, in my opinion. But essentially you have a species, a race, which you can customize, and you can customize them in so many different ways. So you can be different government types, you can be dictatorships, you can be democracies, you can be different alien species that are on water planets or desert planets. You can have different perks that you customize your empire with. You can customize your ships. And then as you progress through the game, you research new technologies, you colonize planets, you can build spaceships, and then you can customize those spaceships with different weapon systems or shields or armor or stuff like that. You build defensive outposts. And if anyone's played a game that's called Sins of a Solar Empire, it's kind of like that, but extremely difficult. And so then you fight all these other empires in the galaxy. But it goes beyond that, because within this game, there's all these kind of events that happen where things get a lot more complicated. So for example, there's these fallen empires, and they're these kind of empires that have been around longer than all the other species. And so even when they kind of awaken, you're kind of a lot weaker than them. And so they add this level of complication to the game because once they wake up, they might say, hey, I am going to go on a religious war against this other fallen empire, so you better join me. And if you don't, I'm going to attack you. And so you have to kind of navigate this complicated diplomatic environment. You have to use diplomacy in the game. You have to think about where you're going to grow or how you're going to build your empire up. And then towards the end of the game, there's these in-game crises where it's kind of like these apocalypse events where there's this kind of alien swarm that swarms the galaxy and it's destroying everything, and the whole galaxy has to kind of unite, or you have to think about how you're going to survive. And the default is almost that you lose, but there's something fun about that. There's something really fun about just living in this world, and it's not like you're just trying to win the game. It's just how you survive and the story that you tell as you go throughout this game. And it's just so fun to play from this just kind of storytelling perspective where your empire grows and you have all these different generals and admirals, and then you have your leader of your species, and you have all these crazy diplomatic things going on. And it's just a ton of fun. And because these games are very difficult and challenging, I think it appeals to a lot of people's kind of strategy mind with these kind of strategy games as well. Now, with these games, they also have a ton of DLC. You actually don't really need the DLC to enjoy the games. You can just get the base game and have a lot of fun with it. And if you really connect with the game, you can kind of get the DLCs over time or in a big Steam summer sale or something like that. And that's true for all the other Paradox games as well. There's definitely DLCs that are more impactful than others in terms of making your experience better, but by no means is it necessary to try these games out. But they're so immersive and so fun. It's just so hard for me to really put it to words. Like, if you're really looking for that next generation of strategy game experience and you haven't played the Paradox games, really owe it to yourself to try them. I really love Stellaris because there's so much immersion with it. There's so much cool things where you have you go out and find relics, and these relics change the way that you're playing the game. And these games last a really long time. They're kind of like, I guess, the Civilization games in terms of they're not like a RTS match like StarCraft or StarCraft 2. They're like these very big, epic stories and games, and it's just a ton of fun. And so, like I said, I think Stellaris is probably one of the more approachable games in the series. But you can also play the other games like EU4, where that kind of has a little bit more of a historical lens, but the storytelling aspect also is kind of involved with it as well. In some of the Paradox games, they also have very vibrant multiplayer communities as well, though I would say that that's definitely not for the faint of heart. And if you really get into these games, you can get hundreds, if not thousands of hours of gameplay out of these games. And so you can get a lot of great value for your money. There's just something special about these games. Now, of course, they have their problems, especially for people that are veterans of these games. But even despite their problems, I think that these games are so much fun. And if you're not a really big strategy gamer and you're looking for something really deep, very complex, very immersive, The Paradox games are great, Stellaris as well in particular. But like I said, they are not for the faint of heart. They can be very overwhelming, but you have to just kind of take it slow, and slowly over time, you build a knowledge base for understanding and playing these games. You could have hundreds of hours into these games, and then you learn something new when you're playing. I mean, I've been playing these games for a very long time, and when I'm playing EU4 or Stellaris, I learn something new with every game that I play. So you don't there's no such thing as, I think, learning enough and then you're good to go. You kind of have enough of a baseline, and then you kind of go from there. A nice quick tip with this as well: if you have someone to play with, you can play in these kind of co-op games, and you can kind of work together as a team and kind of learn the game that way, or just have these really fun experiences that are still very challenging, even if you play co-op with someone. So that's another kind of unique way to play Stellaris or EU4 or some of these games. But like I said, if you're looking for something very immersive and open to a little bit of a challenge, check out the Paradox games and Stellaris in particular. That would be my recommendation. But if one of those different aesthetics connects with you a little bit more, those are great choices as well. And I get it. These games are very complicated and overwhelming, but like I'll tell you the story about Stellaris to try to maybe convince you to try these games out. So I was playing co-op with this video game, and I was playing this very authoritarian kind of dictatorship, kind of like the Imperium in Warhammer 40k. I'm a big 40k Warhammer person, so kind of tried to role play something like that. And we had these dual empires, and we're working together, and we had this kind of nice cross section on the southeastern part of the galaxy, and this terrible federation to our north that were just a constant pain. And we got dragged into these kind of two huge wars with these fallen empires. It was kind of like the North galaxy versus the South galaxy. And it's just complete chaos. Empires are falling into disarray. There's just empires crumbling around us. And we're trying to navigate this political situation, and it gets extremely crazy. And eventually it kind of stalemates for a while. And then there's this fallen empire at the top part of the map, and it starts growing into this huge, just overwhelming force that's just puts everyone in existential danger. But then this kind of in-game crisis happens, and it's this swarm, and the swarm just starts collapsing that huge empire. And we're trying to figure out what to do exactly, because it's like, well, we want them to be weakened, but at the same time too, we're trying to make sure that this swarm doesn't destroy us. And we kind of get to this point where this is the last hope for the galaxy. We have to stop the threat. We both band our fleets together in this kind of one epic battle to kind of shut down the fleets for good. And we have this crazy space engagement. There's thousands of ships flying, there's battleships, and there's frigates, and there's all these laser beams flying, and we finally stop the threat. We save the galaxy, like in the most picturesque, like movie-like moment. And it's just this crazy thing. There's only like 7 or 8 empires left. Their economies are in tatters. We're just trying to survive until then the next in-game crisis happens, and there's a portal, and it's right next to my home world. And we're like, oh no. And sure enough, that was the end of the game, because the next in-game crisis, all these aliens came through this portal and just completely destroyed us. And this was a long time ago. So it's just, there's these epic space moments that just make this game so fun. And so if you're into strategy games, you want something different, check out Stellaris or any of these other games. You can have such amazing times with these games. All right, so for the next game, it's going to be BioShock Infinite. So I like this game a lot, and I know that some people have their problems with this game, especially from the original previews that came out with this game. There was kind of a little bit of a different aesthetic and expectation on what this game was supposed to be, but regardless, I think BioShock Infinite is a great story game. It's a great first-person shooter story game. And if you found the game that kind of recently got announced, Clockwork Revolution, as something really interesting, something that you're excited for, you might really want to check out BioShock Infinite or just BioShock in general. So for the people that wouldn't necessarily recommend BioShock Infinite, a lot of people would maybe suggest BioShock. That's another great choice as well. There's actually a second BioShock as well that you can play. But BioShock Infinite is a great game. It's not too long of a game, but it's got a great story and it's got a really fun gameplay to it. And what I like about BioShock, and BioShock Infinite in particular, is it's those kind of stories where there's a lot of mystery going on. You kind of don't know exactly what's going on. And I love that kind of storytelling where it's just very, very mysterious. You're trying to figure out what's going on. And all the while, it's just got this great aesthetic to it. And the gameplay is really fun. And like I said, if you're just looking for something that's very story-based, BioShock Infinite is a great choice. You know, I feel like a lot of games, they kind of don't, there's just not this like level of creativity with the world building or the storytelling. And it's just kind of missing, I think, in a lot of kind of these first-person story-based games. And so if you're looking for something that's just kind of more story-based, a first-person shooter that has a story-based element, check out BioShock Infinite. I really like this game. It's got a great story and a great world as well. And if you like BioShock Infinite, you might actually also like BioShock and BioShock 2. They all have really good aesthetics to them. It's just really great immersion. And so a lot of people really like these games. I really like BioShock Infinite and the first BioShock as well. So if you're looking for something like that, definitely check these games out. Especially if you found Clockwork Revolution really interesting, I think you might really, really enjoy this. All right, next up on the list is kind of a classic, and it is Dragon Age Origins. Now, Dragon Age Origins is an amazing RPG. The Dragon Age games are great, except for the most recent one. I think that's kind of put a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths, basically. But regardless, that doesn't take away from how good Dragon Age Origins is. And this one's kind of a tough one, I think, to put on the list to some extent, just because of the way that Dragon Age Veilguard, I think, changed the lore around or messed with people's expectations. But despite that, I think you could still have a great time with Dragon Age Origins. You know, Dragon Age Origins is one of those games that's kind of more of like this kind of more old school RPG kind of vibe to things. And it's kind of got this darker aesthetic. It's kind of got this more grit to it that is missing in a lot of modern role-playing games. And I know that a lot of people that play a lot of RPGs have already played Dragon Age Origins, but I still wanted to recommend it to people that maybe haven't played it or that are really not the biggest RPG gamers. Because like I said, this game has this level of grit to it. It has this level of just edge and fascination with its world building and its RPG mechanics. It's got a great story, great cast of characters. It's a lot of people's favorite Dragon Age game. It's my favorite Dragon Age game of the entire series as well. And so if you're looking for something that's kind of more old school, right? You want to have that RPG role-playing immersive experience. You want to have those kind of cast of characters that you want to have just some awesome role-playing dynamics. Play Dragon Age Origins. It's a great game, even now. I like the complexity of the older games as well, compared to kind of the modernization of some of the RPGs that we see today. And so if you're just missing kind of that old school feel and you haven't played Dragon Age Origins, you really should check this game out. If you haven't played it, highly recommend it. And I think a lot of RPG gamers would totally say the same thing. It's just a tough thing to say, just given the recent state of Dragon Age, unfortunately. But regardless, I'm still going to put this on this list because I do think it's an awesome game. You can have a lot of fun with it. It's a classic for a lot of people. And so just have to put it on there and check it out. All right, so for this next game, I'm going to recommend this because I think it's just pure fun. And I think that for some people, they're missing this kind of idea within gaming. It's not the most perfect game out there, but it's a ton of fun. Despite all of its problems, I think it's worth playing. And it's Chivalry 2. Now, I love Chivalry. I played the original Chivalry game, but Chivalry 2, in my opinion, just embodies this kind of fun multiplayer aspect of video games. And basically, it is kind of a multiplayer competitive game where people just are on two teams and they attack each other with big two-handed swords or axes, and it doesn't really take itself too seriously, but it's just a ton of fun. This is just such a fun game, and to me, it really embodies kind of this more old school idea of the multiplayer experience where we weren't just trying to climb ranks or trying to become this pro gamer or this pro streamer, or I'm trying to climb to the max rank of something, or all the skill-based matchmaking and stuff like that. This game is just kind of it reminds me of kind of more of the old school multiplayer experience with video games. And it's got just a lot of fun maps in the game. It doesn't take itself too seriously. There is a progression system where you rank up and unlock things, but the game is just so much fun. I think it's a pretty approachable game. And it's just, if you're looking for something just to have fun with, just kind of go back and play some old fun multiplayer experience. This is just a phenomenal game. There's so many weapons to use and different maps, and it's just a ton of fun. And let me know which team is your favorite, Agatha or Mason's. Personally, I think Agatha is finished, but regardless, I'm on Team Mason, of course. But it's just such a fun game. And like I said, it's a callback to this kind of old school mechanic and idea of multiplayer games. So if you're sick of the skill-based matchmaking and stuff like this, check out Chivalry 2. It's not a first-person shooter because it's just, you're attacking with a sword and shield and stuff like that. But you might really enjoy it, especially if you're not into these kind of games. And there's other games like this. So some people would suggest Mordhau, but Mordhau has a very I think it's a little bit more of a higher skill cap game. A lot of the people that are still playing Mordhau are very good. So I don't know if I would recommend that one over Chivalry 2. I think Chivalry 2 is a lot more approachable. I think that if you're really tired of kind of the modern multiplayer experience, I think what you have to do is kind of go back to these other games that are a little bit more niche, that kind of embody this old school multiplayer experience. Like Chivalry 2, in my opinion, is a good game that kind of embodies this to some extent. There's other games out there that they remind me of the old school way of how video games used to be, like the old school Counter-Strike, like Counter-Strike Source or Counter-Strike 1.6. It reminds me of it a little bit. It's not completely there, but reminds me in so many ways of this. And so if you're like looking for that to some extent, I think Chivalry 2 is a great example of this. And some people would also, like I said, suggest Mordhau. And there's other games that I could put out on this list that kind of have this kind of more niche multiplayer communities. If you're sick of the modern FPS stuff, you're sick of that kind of dynamic with video games, you kind of have to kind of go into these more niche titles. You have to kind of go into these games that are more complex, that get you back into that kind of old school video game experience. Like in the FPS genre in particular, like I think you have to play something like Squad or Arma 3 to kind of get that vibe. And so if you're, those are great games for the people that might like them. So if you're like not into the modern Call of Duty Battlefield stuff, go into this kind of more smaller community games like Chivalry 2, Squad, Arma 3. I think you'll have a great time with them. But as it relates to just kind of having pure fun with that multiplayer experience, check out Chivalry 2. It's just so much fun. Totally would recommend it. And of course, Agatha is finished for the Mason Order. Okay, and so next we have Balatro, or is it Balatro? I'm actually not quite sure, but I like saying Balatro, so we'll just go with that. But basically, this is an extremely fun indie game that recently came out, or I guess it came out in 2024. But basically, this game is so much fun. Don't let the cards or the graphics fool you, but basically it's this kind of really interesting play on poker. It's this kind of deck building game where you basically try to take your typical 52 card deck and try to improve it, but you also have these joker cards that modify your deck and help you to get more points. And so you go through these rounds where the point totals that you need in terms of scoring different hands, so like full house, straights, things like that, you earn points by getting those hands, but you can modify them with your joker cards or with cards in your overall deck. And this game is just a ton of fun. I don't really want to spend too much time talking about this game just because I think a lot of people are familiar with it. It's a lot of fun, but if you haven't gotten a chance to play this game, it's a ton of fun. And surprisingly, there's a lot of strategy and difficulty with this game, but it's a ton of fun. And in a weird way, it's kind of relaxing, or at least for me, it's kind of relaxing. And there's all these different decks to beat the game on and these different stakes that make the game even harder. And so trying to beat the game on all these different decks that kind of change the deck and your strategy up a little bit is a lot of fun. And the difficulties also just give a ton of replayability. And so you can get dozens of hours out of Balatro or whatever it's called, but it's a ton of fun. I would highly recommend it. This is a great game. This is a great chill game to play that has a lot of strategies. And like I said, I think for some people, they look at this and they go, well, that's cool. It's a cool indie game, but not for me. Well, I think this game is extremely addicting. It's a ton of fun. I've had a ton of fun playing Balatro, and I would highly recommend it. All right, and next I wanted to recommend Satisfactory. And Satisfactory is an extremely fun game where basically you start off and build a factory, and then that factory builds another factory, and then you have multiple factories that connect with each other, all with the goal of building more factories. But ultimately you're trying to kind of build this ultimate mega project, and you need a bunch of resources to kind of complete this mega project. And so that mega project requires a bunch of different materials or parts. And so you basically build factories to then build this overall mega structure. And that's kind of the core of the game. And so I think a lot of people think about that idea and they think, well, this is just silly. It's just building factories. And yes, it is building factories, but the game is oddly satisfying, hence the name Satisfactory. And I think that with Satisfactory, it's one of these games that it seems very complex and intense, and it kind of is. It can get very overwhelming, but at the same time too, it is a very chill and relaxing game if you kind of go into it with the right mindset. You know, when I first started playing Satisfactory, I actually kind of struggled with this game. I gave it a good faith effort, and then I kind of didn't like it. And then I gave it another try, tried to change my mindset around, and then I had a ton of fun and got to the very end of the game. And so I actually have a video on this if you want to check it out. I'll link it in the description box where I basically talk about how to get into Satisfactory, especially if you have a struggle with this game in the past. But this is a very fun game, and it's kind of this relaxing game where you basically build factories, and it's got this kind of very cool world. It's kind of got this kind of little bit of a light humorous element to it, but there's something to be said about starting off with this just very small factory. And over time, you just make it bigger and bigger and more efficient. And then that connects to other factories, and you have roads, and you can build railroads and all these things. And it's just very satisfying kind of seeing all this work and production built out over time. And so if you're one of those people that really likes to see in a city builder, as an example, your city build up or something like that, this is a very fun game. And even if you're not kind of this person that would maybe give this game a try, I highly suggest you maybe try it out. It's a lot of fun. It seems kind of weird because you're building a factory, but I really do think that this can be an extremely fun game. I think that the key thing with Satisfactory is to just kind of go in with the right mindset, just because I think that it can be overwhelming where you're trying to be efficient all the time. And I think that's where most people probably get stuck. But I think if you go in with a very calm mindset, Satisfactory can be, oddly, very satisfying. And if you enjoy Satisfactory, there's a lot of other kind of games that are similar to this that you could find a lot of fun and enjoyment from. And there's a lot of these games that maybe aren't a one-to-one with Satisfactory, but there's a lot of games that take inspiration from it or similarities to it that you can have a lot of fun with. All right, and next up on the list, I'm going to have to recommend something that is so ultra popular that a lot of people are just going to go, why? Why are you recommending this? But it's going to be kind of a curveball a little bit. And I'm going to recommend The Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind. Now, that's a little bit of a curveball because I think that if you're an RPG gamer, you should definitely check out the Elder Scrolls games. So I would imagine that most gamers have probably played Skyrim. If you haven't played Skyrim, you absolutely should. Or if you haven't played Oblivion, you should definitely check those out. So kind of my recommendation is the Elder Scrolls games. So Morrowind, Oblivion, Skyrim. But I'm going to put Morrowind on this list just because I have a feeling that a lot of people have played Skyrim and they haven't played Oblivion or Morrowind, or people have played Oblivion and Skyrim and they haven't played Morrowind. So as a result of that, I'll just talk about all of them briefly, but these are great RPGs, and each one of them has their own pluses and minuses, I suppose. Well, let me talk about Oblivion first, okay? Because I think I would highly recommend Oblivion. Kind of more recently, people have gotten really excited over the Oblivion remaster, which, to be honest with you, I still like the old art style of Oblivion. I'm a big fan of Oblivion. I love the soundtrack of Oblivion. It's my favorite soundtrack of the Elder Scrolls games. But basically, if you've only played Skyrim, you should definitely go and play the other two. They're so much fun, and I think Oblivion is probably the easier game to try out if you like Skyrim and you haven't played the other games. It's similar in a lot of ways. There's a lot more complexity and certain things that I like about Oblivion over Skyrim, like the Thieves Guild and the Dark Brotherhood, are way better in Oblivion than they are in Skyrim, as an example. And so if you like Skyrim, it should be obvious to go and try Oblivion out. There's just a part of me that still wants to recommend the original Oblivion, but at the same time too, I understand why people play the remaster. Something about the art style to me is just really off from someone that absolutely loves Oblivion. And so, maybe some graphical mods or stuff like that would be worth checking out on Oblivion, but I'm not going to get, too opinionated about that. But let's talk about Morrowind, because this is the one that I think people haven't played, and it's a kind of a tough recommendation just because I think that Morrowind is dated in a lot of ways, and some people would maybe suggest that you don't play it, but I think that Morrowind is a very interesting role-playing experience. I kind of hesitate to put this game on the list, but I think that you can make Morrowind a little bit more enjoyable with some mods. There's some probably mod lists out there that make the game more enjoyable just because there's certain things very dated about the game. And I think some games that are just going to stop certain people in their tracks just because there's a lot of reading in Morrowind. It's a lot slower paced. The combat is just very, very primitive. And of course, that was kind of back where, you could totally mess up quest lines if certain NPCs die in the game. And so it's a very volatile experience. But at the same time, too, it's worth a try if you're someone that kind of just is not intimidated by that and just wants something different. They want something that's kind of going back to that old school. And I think it is worth playing, especially if you can get some mods in there and stuff like that. You could still have a ton of fun with. And so I would just highly suggest, check it out if you're willing to kind of go through some of the hassles of the game. It's just, like I said, it's very slow paced just because there's a ton of reading and stuff like that. But even if you can't really handle Morrowind, go for Oblivion. I think Oblivion's a little bit easier of a transition to Skyrim. And if you haven't played Skyrim either, play these games. These are very fun role-playing games. People absolutely love them for a reason. If for some reason you haven't played an Elder Scrolls game, I don't know, you should go and definitely check them out. And then just before we end on the Elder Scrolls, I wanted to kind of pose two things to you. So first off, let me know what is your favorite race in all of the Elder Scrolls games. Mine is actually the Khajiit. I think the Khajiit are awesome. They're just so great. And probably number two for me is Argonians. Yeah, I like playing all the outcasts in Elder Scrolls. So Khajiit's my favorite. I have played a stealth archer before, but who hasn't if they played these games? But yeah, Khajiit is my favorite. Let me know who is your favorite. And then also, kind of a more deeper question is, do you support the Stormcloaks or the Imperials in Skyrim? What do you think? Let me know what you think in the comment section. And of course, while we're here, we might as well talk about the Fallout games as well. And my recommendation with this would be Fallout New Vegas, which is my favorite Fallout game. And a lot of people, I think, fit in a similar category to this. So the only reason why I wanted to, and I know some people are probably mad at me maybe for recommending these games, but they're fun to talk about. But I think there are some people that have not played the Elder Scrolls games or the Fallout games, or they've only played Fallout 4 or Skyrim. And so that's why I'm putting this on the list. I want to just try to convince someone to say, hey, give Oblivion a try, give Morrowind a try, or give Fallout New Vegas or Fallout 3 a try. I guess it depends. Maybe there is no one that this makes sense for, but I think it was still, important to me to try to put these games on the list, even though they're ultra popular. But I like New Vegas a lot. Yes, I'm one of those people that likes New Vegas. I think that I really like the grittiness and the kind of role-playing aspects of Fallout New Vegas, especially compared to Fallout 4. I wasn't a big fan of the voice protagonist in Fallout 4 and some of the design decisions that have gone in the direction of Fallout 4, but Fallout New Vegas is a ton of fun. They're post-apocalyptic RPGs, basically. They have this kind of element of humor to them. And so I won't talk about them too much just because people have talked so much about Elder Scrolls and Fallout and stuff like that. But I'd also suggest that if you're willing to go back and play the older Fallout games, check out, Fallout 3. I think Fallout 3 is also a lot of fun. I think the transition to New Vegas is easier if you deal with Fallout 3 and then go to New Vegas. I know that people have talked about the flaws of these games and have analyzed them ad nauseum, but I think that they're fun games to play regardless. And so if you've only played Fallout 4 or you've never played a Fallout game, check out the other Fallout games, Fallout 3 and New Vegas. And of course, there is Fallout 1 and Fallout 2, which are a little bit different than the kind of modern iterations of the Fallout games. You can have a lot of fun with them. They're just a little bit different, just given the graphical style and when the games were made and the combat and stuff like that. But they are kind of more of that older school, top-down RPG vein, which you can have fun with as well. It's just not going to be the same experience as something like Fallout 4 as an example. So thanks for bearing with me on these, but I just wanted to point them out that if you haven't played the Elder Scrolls games or the Fallout games, definitely check them out. Like I said, I think that for people that have only played Skyrim, check out Oblivion, and if you can handle it, Morrowind. You might not resonate with that, but you could have a ton of fun with it. And then, like I said, with Fallout New Vegas, that's my recommendation, but I think you can have fun with Fallout 1 and 2 and 3 as well, and maybe even 4, even though I have my problems with that game. So sorry if I had to put those games on the list. They're ultra popular. Everyone knows about them, but still, for the maybe few people that haven't played those games, check them out. You can have a ton of fun with them. Check them out. Okay, this next one I'm really excited to talk about because I'm a big fan of this series, and it is the Final Fantasy series. And in particular, if I had to recommend one Final Fantasy game to you, I would pick Final Fantasy IX. Now, Final Fantasy IX is actually one of my favorite Final Fantasies. I go back and forth between 6 and 9. Those are my two favorites. Sometimes it's 6, sometimes it's 9. But regardless, I think that 9 is probably the best entry point if you've never played a Final Fantasy game. So if you've never played a Final Fantasy game, I would suggest 9. I feel like 9 represents the true essence of Final Fantasy. And I think that it's also the most approachable. A lot of people would suggest 7. That's kind of like the fan favorite, a lot of people's favorite Final Fantasy. But the original 7 is very rough around the edges if you play it nowadays. And some people would also suggest 10, a great starting point as well. But 10 is a little bit different than the older Final Fantasy games. Not that it's bad, it's a great game as well. So I would just suggest 9. But I wanted to kind of talk about all of these games, at least briefly, because I think that a lot of the older school Final Fantasy games are totally worth playing today. They're a lot of people's favorite video games of all time. And even if you play them in the modern day, you can have a lot of fun with them. They all have amazing soundtracks. I mean, top tier soundtracks. They have awesome casts of characters, great stories. And the gameplay, for what it is, can still be fun, even though it's just this very simple and generally straightforward combat system. And so I wanted to talk about kind of all of them in a little bit of detail. But just the general gist of it is that even if you're not like a big JRPG gamer, and I think that's probably a lot of people's obstacles, they don't play JRPGs or they're not really into this just kind of Japanese media, I'd still kind of encourage you to give these games a try because they're so awesome. I mean, like I said, some people think of them as their favorite video games of all time. And I think that a lot of them have aged actually pretty well. And so I actually think that Final Fantasy IX has aged very well. And so if you're going to try to give these games a try, I would start with 9. 9 has an awesome cast of characters. I love the characters in Final Fantasy IX. It's got a wonderful soundtrack, an awesome story, a phenomenal ending, and it's just a ton of fun. And hey, if you like Final Fantasy, you might get into the other games, and so you're going to open yourself up to dozens, if not hundreds of hours of gameplay, and that's going to be fun, awesome game time. Generally, you're going to also resonate probably with some of the music and the stories, and so I talked about Chrono Trigger earlier as a great entry point to JRPGs, and if I wasn't going to pick Chrono Trigger, I would definitely pick Final Fantasy IX. But I wanted to talk about the older school Final Fantasies just because, even just a little briefly, just because, I don't know, I want to. And, I still recommend them, and it's just fun to talk about these games. And, a lot of people that would recommend the Final Fantasy games, or some people would recommend the newer games. So like 13 or 15 or 16, or the 7 remake. And I actually think that that's not the way to go. So there's been some people that I've seen where they started with like Final Fantasy 15, or they played the Final Fantasy 7 remake and they go, I don't get it. And I totally understand, just because the older school Final Fantasies are very different, just given the original creator of the series and other dynamics that I won't go into detail about. But if you really think about the old school Final Fantasy games that people absolutely love, that's probably like 4 through 10. Now, 1 through 3 are very dated, and so you might have a really tough time playing through those games. So I think 4 through 10 is probably like the kind of considered the classical top tier Final Fantasy games. Some people would also put 12 in there, or maybe 11 if you played the MMO. I didn't play Final Fantasy 11 when it came out. And some people, like I said, would put 12, maybe 10 2 in there. And then the more modern incarnations are very different in my opinion. I don't like the newer Final Fantasy games. That's a lot of people would agree with me, but some people do like them. But regardless, I wanted to talk about some of these kind of older school Final Fantasy games just because I think you can have a lot of fun with them. And it's fine to like Final Fantasy 13 or 15 or whatever, so it is what it is, but I wanted to talk about these older school ones. So I'm not going to talk about 1 through 3 because like I said, they're very dated. They're kind of products of the time. And so the earliest I would probably go, unless you really want to explore things, is Final Fantasy 4. And so Final Fantasy 4 is a great game. It is still very old, but it's got an awesome soundtrack. I mean, it's got a great boss theme. Battle of the Four Fiends as like a song is awesome. Just like a phenomenal soundtrack. And it was one of those kind of first JRPGs to kind of really get into the story side of things. And so it's got an okay story. It's got an all right cast of characters. It's fun. I wouldn't start with Final Fantasy 4. If you played a bunch of other Final Fantasy games, you might go back and play 4 and really enjoy it. But to some extent, it's a product of the time, but it's got a great soundtrack and there can be some things to enjoy from the game if you enjoy the other Final Fantasy games. Now, then there's 5. Now, I really love 5. 5 is extremely underrated. If there was a Final Fantasy game that was underrated, I would say it's absolutely 5. Got this really cool job system where all your characters can change classes, and it's got some awesome music, really great town themes, and Battle of the Big Bridge, great songs, and it's got a really cool cast of characters. It's definitely not the most story-focused of the Final Fantasy games, but for the music and the combat system, a lot of people really like it. And then there's Final Fantasy 6. And like I said, if I wasn't going to pick 9, I'd probably say 6 is my favorite. 6 has a phenomenal soundtrack. I think 8 probably has the best soundtrack, but 6 has a phenomenal cast of characters. It's got the best battle theme of all time in the Final Fantasy series, in my opinion. The greatest battle theme. I love that theme. And it probably has the best villain in all the Final Fantasy games. And I really like the ending. I won't spoil anything, but I like the ending of Final Fantasy VI because it's just very different, I think, than what you see in other JRPGs or other stories. That's all I'll say about it. And by the way, the final boss theme in Final Fantasy VI is wonderful. It's amazing. It's like a masterpiece song. And especially when you think about when that song was made and the technology at the time, it makes it even that much more impressive. A very awesome boss theme. And some people would actually say that's the greatest boss theme of all time. But I love Final Fantasy VI. It's just got this awesome aesthetic, great story, great cast of characters. And then there's Final Fantasy VII. And I really like Final Fantasy VII. As I mentioned, it's not my favorite. I do enjoy the game. A lot of people would say that 7 is their favorite. And it's just got a great cast of characters, a great story, great music, awesome music. The boss theme, like the generic boss theme for Final Fantasy VII, I love it. It's awesome. And people have analyzed that game ad nauseum, and so I won't talk about it. But playing that game is a lot of fun. It's a little rough around the edges, at least the PC port is, and so it's a little tough. But I think it is worth playing. But it's just you have to understand that it is a little rough around the edges. And so some people would suggest playing the Final Fantasy VII remake, and to be honest with you, I really wouldn't. The game is just very different than the original. They changed the story around without getting into too much details and spoilers and stuff like that. The story is just so changed that I just don't even know what it is anymore. Some people like it because it's a retelling, but I don't know. I don't really care for it. I think that the way that they've divided the game up into multiple games kind of messes the pacing up of the game. There's these kind of remixes of the songs, which are cool twists on it, but I think that there's just nothing quite like the original classic songs. And so it's not the same feeling. There's things to like about it and appreciate about Final Fantasy VII Remake. But honestly, I feel like if you've never played the Final Fantasy games, you owe it to yourself to play the original. Like I said, even though it's rough around the edges, if you do want to kind of experience these classics, it's worth playing. And then you can maybe play the remake, and I think you might have more appreciation for it rather than going into the remake and then playing the original. I think that's just like a weird way to play it. And some people have jumped into Final Fantasy with the 7 remake, and I don't know if I would suggest that. I just think I don't know. I don't know what they're doing with the story. I don't want to get into spoilers, but it just seems like it's going into too much Kingdom Hearts territory with this weirdness. I don't know. That's another video topic, to be honest with you. If you want me to talk about it, I'll talk about it in another video. That's a whole thing where people have tons of opinions about it. If you have thoughts about the Final Fantasy VII remakes, let me know in the comment section. Love to hear your thoughts about it. And then there's Final Fantasy VIII. And I like Final Fantasy VIII. A lot of people are really, really hard on this game, and I get it. A lot of people don't necessarily like some of the cast of characters, and the story's kind of weird. But it's got, I think, at least in my opinion, I think it's got the best soundtrack in the entire series. Just awesome music, phenomenal soundtrack. I think a lot of people also don't like the game because of the combat system. It's got this junction combat system that's kind of weird, and a lot of times when people played the game, they didn't understand what they were doing, and so it's a little confusing. But I think that people are a little too hard on the game, and I actually really like the game, and I think it's got like a really interesting ending too. I mean, there's kind of the default ending, but I like the fan interpretations of the Final Fantasy VIII ending. It's like my headcanon. I won't spoil it. I kind of have my own twist on it, which I think is kind of interesting, which makes it kind of, I don't know, unique as a Final Fantasy game. And I know that probably the creators have said, oh no, that's not really what I meant for the ending to be, but I don't know. I mean, it's art in the end of the day, and so you have your own interpretation of it. And so I think that there's some really interesting, I guess, ways to think about the ending if you think about the game a little bit differently. But anyways, I like Final Fantasy VIII. That would be maybe not necessarily the greatest starting point. I would not recommend Final Fantasy VIII as a starting point. And then you have Final Fantasy IX. And 9 is amazing. Like I said, I think it's really the true embodiment of Final Fantasy. It's got a phenomenal cast of characters. Vivi is an awesome character. Garnet's an awesome character. Zidane's an awesome character. They're so good. And the story is great. Awesome soundtrack. I mean, you go into Alexandria, which is like the very start of the game, and it's just got this beautiful song. It's got my favorite overworld theme in the entire series, Crossing Those Hills. I love that song. It's kind of got this melancholy vibe to it. And, that's the thing about these Final Fantasy games. Like, I'm talking about a game that's so old and the music is so old, but it sticks with you. I mean, even if you're really not a huge music person, these soundtracks are so awesome. Like, all the games are like so awesome, and they really stick with you. And I think with a lot of Western games, you don't have a very memorable soundtrack, and the Final Fantasy game soundtrack is just top notch, top tier. And so they are so good that it helps you to connect with the characters. It helps you to connect with the story and the combat and the intenseness of the moment. And so even if you're not a big music person, I do think that these songs will resonate with you and you'll have this deep appreciation for them. I mean, I'm talking about the overworld theme for Final Fantasy IX, which is awesome. And then, so, it's got just a solid game throughout. I think it's aged very well. And then we have Final Fantasy X. Now, Final Fantasy X is also an awesome game. It's got a great soundtrack too. It's got this kind of beach vibe to it. It's got a phenomenal story, a great cast of characters. Orin, or if I'm pronouncing that correctly, is an awesome character. I mean, what an awesome character. He's got this great moment in the middle part of the game, or like the end middle part of the game, this awesome quote. It's really great. And I think people are too tough on the main character, Titus. I know people will say his name is Titus, but let's just go with Titus, okay? And I think people are a little too hard on him. And it's just really a great story, and it's totally worth playing. It's a little bit of a deviation from the older Final Fantasy games. And then things kind of start to change after that with Final Fantasy X-2. I know people like that game, but it's just things start to change. Like I said, people like Final Fantasy XI, the MMO. I haven't played it. And then you have Final Fantasy XII, which I think it's an okay game. I don't love Final Fantasy XII, but I don't hate it. It's got some awesome songs in it, and it really had some awesome potential with just its epicness and stuff, but it's kind of got this combat system, and so it's kind of weird. And then with the kind of more recent modern games like Final Fantasy 13, 15, and 16, they kind of just go in this different direction. I think the storytelling gets a little just off for my tastes, and the combat system becomes more real time rather than turn based. And so people don't like some of these ideas. So, like I said, my recommendation would be to play Final Fantasies 4 through 10, but start with Final Fantasy 9. I think if you like Final Fantasy 9, you might really like the other games, and they're so good, like I said, for the characters, the story, the music, and all those things. And you can have an awesome time with them, and they're a great introduction to JRPGs. And if you like them, you might explore more games in the JRPG space, which could bring you hundreds of hours of fun. And so they're totally worth playing. And if you're not going to pick Final Fantasy 9, I would maybe suggest Final Fantasy X as an entry point, maybe 6. I do think that 6 can be a little intimidating at times, but if you've never played a Final Fantasy game, check out 9. And let me know what is your favorite Final Fantasy. I'd love to hear it in the comment section below. Who's your favorite Final Fantasy character as well? Love to hear that as well. I don't know if I have one, to be honest with you. That's tough. There's so many good characters in the series, and that's the thing about it. It's just they're so good. So check out the Final Fantasy games. Cannot praise them enough. They're totally worth playing, and check them out. Okay, and so next I wanted to talk about one of my favorite indie games of all time, and it is FTL, Faster Than Light. And I actually did a video on this, which if you're interested, check it out. I talk about FTL in a little bit more detail, but I highly recommend this game. This is an extremely fun game. It's this kind of space roguelike game where you take control of a spaceship, you have a crew, and you basically try to go through all these different zones, upgrade your crew, upgrade your ships, and then beat the boss at the end. And this game is actually very challenging, even on the easier difficulties, and there's a ton of replayability. So there's all these different ships in the game, and they kind of change the way that you play the game. So for example, some ships are kind of more focused on boarding the enemy ship, or some ships have kind of this interesting energy shield, or are kind of more standard. And so these different ships and these different crew members kind of change the way that you play the game. At the same time too, as you go throughout the run, you have to make decisions about how to upgrade your ship. Maybe you focus on missiles, lasers, things like that. Maybe you get a new crew member, and some of these crew members have different abilities. And so it's a lot of fun. It's got a wonderful soundtrack. And I know I keep saying that about a lot of different video games, but this has just got a great soundtrack. I'm a big video game music person, and so when I hear a great video game soundtrack, it makes the game even better. With all these ships, there's kind of these different variants of each of the ships, which changes the layouts. And so you can get dozens of hours of gameplay out of this game. To be honest with you, there's not really much to be said about this. It's just an extremely fun game. I've said this many times in this video, and I guess it's a recurring theme, but don't let the graphics fool you. I mean, this is an extremely fun game. Like I said, it's one of my favorite indie games of all time. And it's just something that is just a lot of fun. At one moment, everything's going well, and then in the next moment, things are complete chaos. 2 of your crew members are dead. There's fire all over your ship, and you're just trying to jump out, and you thought you were totally safe before the battle. And so it's a very chaotic game, but it just makes it so fun. And like I said, you can get so many hours of gameplay time out of it. And so if you want to just play a roguelike game, want to take a risk on it, you don't have a lot of experience playing these games, I highly recommend FTL. FTL is an awesome game, and you should definitely check it out. All right, the next one has a lot of very passionate fans, and myself included, and it is Kerbal Space Program. And I apologize if I've been recommending a lot of games that are kind of difficult. I promise you that not every single game on this list is extremely hard or difficult, but I love Kerbal Space Program. This is a wonderful game. I actually started kind of in the very early days when it was kind of more unknown, but Kerbal Space Program has come a long way. And this is an extremely fun game where basically I would describe it as you're basically running your own space program, and you just try to build spaceships and explore the different planets in this solar system. And there's a kind of a free mode, and there's a kind of a career mode and stuff like that. But that's the general gist of it. But the game is very overwhelming, I think, for some people, because the space mechanics of trying to, explore the solar system. But at the same time too, the game has this just kind of really fun charm to it. The Kerbals are kind of very humorous. It just kind of adds this light touch to things, and it just kind of works, to be honest with you. And I think with Kerbal Space Program, if you can kind of get over the initial hurdle with the game and the difficulty and just accept that it's going to be hard at times, you can have a ton of fun with that. And I know that I keep saying that about a lot of games. I've talked about this difficulty idea with a lot of different video games, but I do think that some of the best video games out there are kind of hidden behind some of the difficulty in some of these games. And the difficulty in these games kind of, I think, is what adds this level of touch to them. It's just this very kind of, I think, passionate gamer mindset when it comes to some of these games that are very difficult. And so I think with Kerbal Space Program, it's no different. And so when you have a very difficult video game, you want to kind of try to go in with a very patient mindset and just try to figure things out, because a lot of times when you just finally understand the game, when you kind of put that time in, you can have an amazing experience. And Kerbal Space Program is no different, where you can get so many hours out of this game. There are a ton of passionate fans of Kerbal Space Program, and so that should tell you something. And I think that with Kerbal Space Program as well, it's kind of one of those games where you can approach it in very different ways. You know, there are mods that make it a lot easier, and so I'm not the biggest Kerbal Space Program expert out there, so there might be someone that can really kind of give you tips on what's the best way to approach things. If you are really passionate about Kerbal Space Program, leave a comment below, maybe give some people some tips on some stuff. But I actually like to think about Kerbal Space Program as like kind of this journey where you're going to make mistakes. I mean, just kind of getting out off the planet in the initial like Earth world, Kerbin, I think it's what it's called. It can be difficult. There's a level of like trial and error with this game, which to me kind of adds to things. Because what you could do is you could just kind of look up a bunch of tutorials online and just say, hey, just build your spaceship like this and just do this, and then you'll go explore this planet. Okay, how do I get to Mars? Okay, I'll just do this, and this, just follow some YouTuber's advice. And I think that can be useful and relevant. But I think part of the charm of this game is kind of just overcoming some of the challenges yourself. Like when you actually do land on the moon and you built a spaceship to get there, or you kind of get to this next scientific level, it's satisfying that you figured out a design and you did trial and error. And there's not really these huge consequences of making mistakes. That's one of the things that I think makes Kerbal Space Program really fun, is kind of just trying to figure out, okay, how do I actually make this happen? Like it's like you're running a space program. And of course it is difficult, like I said, so I won't necessarily fault people for looking up maybe some YouTubers or something like that to help them out. But I think that at the same time too, when you go into this game, it's good to have that mindset of just trying to figure it out. That's like some of the fun of this progression. I think that's what makes it so rewarding when you do land on the moon or something like that. And so that's just my advice, but I think that's an important component behind this game. Regardless, this is an extremely fun game. It's definitely been crafted with so much passion, and it's just a ton of fun with just building new spacecraft or aircraft, and even just trying to get a little research boosts and stuff like that. It's just a ton of fun. I mean, there's so many people that are so passionate about this game. I would highly recommend it. Even if you're really not into kind of space stuff, there's just a lot of depth to this game. So, you might be pleasantly surprised that you found so much enjoyment from this game. But like I said, the biggest obstacle is just realize that yes, it can be difficult, but you got to go into it with the right mindset, with a passionate mindset. You can have so much fun with this game. I mean, there's a reason why people are so passionate about this game. And there is a second Kerbal Space Program, but to be honest with you, I'm just going to suggest to you the first one. There's a lot of problems with the second Kerbal Space Program, which I won't get into. And I kind of talk about it in this video that I did about video game betrayals. And if you are actually really liking this video, by the way, and you kind of like this dialogue, just talking about video games and stuff like that, I highly encourage you to check out the video that I did on video game betrayals. It's very much like this style where we just talk about video games, but instead of recommendations, I'm kind of talking about like these betrayal moments and spoilers, I suppose. One of those games on that list is Kerbal Space Program 2. So if you like this video and you like kind of the style of things, and you want more, check out that video. I'll link it in the description or up above as well. But anyways, definitely check out Kerbal Space Program, especially like if you're a big space person, you like nerding out about astronomy and space and stuff like that. I mean, go and play Kerbal Space Program. This is an awesome game. So awesome. And I would just highly recommend it. Check it out. It's amazing. And just if you can get over that difficulty curve, you can just have this amazing experience playing this game. All right. And next up on the list is a very interesting choice, and it is Kenshi. Now, Kenshi is a very interesting and very unique video game. It's this open world RPG that takes place in this kind of post-apocalyptic world where you take control of a squad of people or one person and kind of live in this world. And despite all of its problems, this is a very interesting and very fun video game. And Kenshi's world is just very, very, very brutal. And it's almost like you're just trying to survive. And it almost in a lot of ways, I feel like models kind of the real world and the struggle of the real world in so many ways. But despite that, it's a lot of fun. And I think that with Kenshi, the game is definitely very rough around the edges. It does feel like you just wish it had more content in a way, but it's such a unique experience and you just don't see it in so many different RPGs that I think that if you're a big RPG gamer or you're just looking for something very different, a little weird, a little unique, Kenshi is absolutely worth checking out. It's kind of got this very interesting combat system where there's damage to different parts of your body. So there's like a leg damage and head damage and arm damage, and then it affects your movement. You have all these different stats that you can have, and you take control of these characters. And then you, of course, get better at these skills. Then you can have like kind of a squad of characters. Eventually you can build your own settlement. But like I said, things get very tough. There are people competing for resources. And so there is, for example, this religious civilization where if you don't carry their holy book around, they will arrest you. Or there's all these really dangerous monsters that will totally make you have a terrible day if you encounter them and you're not extremely skilled and are not prepared. And so Kenshi is just very unique in this sense. It's just got this kind of interesting world too that is very just very engaging and very interesting. And I think that the people that would enjoy Kenshi the most are people that kind of have their own headcanon and lore with things, where you can kind of tell your own story within your head and just kind of live and roleplay in that sense, despite all the problems with the game that are there. But Kenshi also, in a weird way, it does like this role-playing experience in a very interesting kind of way. So for example, there's these different starts in the game. And so one of the starts is that you start out as a slave and you're a slave in like an encampment. And so you can almost think of your role-playing experience as trying to eventually escape slavery. And like it can be very difficult. And maybe over time you need to get strong enough, or maybe something happens to you and you're injured and that's where your journey ends. But even just the idea of eventually escaping slavery is just like this huge role-playing experience that's very non-traditional compared to the normal gameplay experience. And then from that, you could maybe go out and go into different paths depending on what you would do after escaping slavery. There's another start in the game where you kind of start off near a ton of cannibals. And so there's like a part of the map that's overrun by these cannibals. And so it's like this just chaotic start at the very beginning of the game. And then, of course, there's kind of these more traditional starts as well. And so there's a lot of interesting role-playing aspects to it. And it's just kind of got this character to it that I really appreciate. And so when I think about like the potential of RPGs and what I'd love to see, like Kenshi has so much of it, despite all of its flaws and despite me wishing that there was more content and there was more filling the world up. I think that the developer of the game is slowly working on the second Kenshi, which, who knows when that will get done, but it's a very interesting game. A lot of people have had a lot of fun with it. It's kind of has a little bit of meme territory to it, which is very fun. But despite all of its flaws, I think for the right person, you can really enjoy this game. And especially if you're looking for something very different in the RPG space, or you're just looking for something a little bit different from like a video game experience, you want something very out there, very different, Kenshi could be a great choice, despite all of its flaws. And like I said, for the right person, I think you can have a ton of fun with this. It's definitely not for everyone, but I just wanted to put it on here because it's so unique, because it's such a different experience. And I think that some people would really resonate with this wackiness and this weirdness of Kenshi. And so I've had a lot of fun playing Kenshi. I would highly recommend it and definitely check it out. Okay, and next up is a video game that is kind of popular, or at least it got some popularity recently. And it is Kingdom Come Deliverance, and I'm referring to the first one. Now, I know that the second game has kind of made Kingdom Come Deliverance a lot more popular, but I did want to talk to some of the people that maybe gave Kingdom Come Deliverance or the second game a try. They didn't like it, or they've kind of seen the combat and you just thought, this is not for me. Or maybe to the people that haven't even played this game. So I really like Kingdom Come Deliverance. Like I said, I'm going to talk about the first one because I do think that if you're going to play these games, it's definitely worth playing the first one before the second one. I think you'll have more appreciation for it. And to be honest with you, I really like a lot of aspects of the first game as well. But regardless, Kingdom Come Deliverance is a medieval RPG where you basically play as kind of this normal person, the son of a blacksmith, and go throughout this story and basically live the life as this kind of medieval person. Now, this is an extremely immersive game. I think that it really nails that medieval aesthetic and kind of really tries to stick home to this realism of the medieval world. And there is a level of, I guess, difficulty with the game, and it kind of, in a way, has this parallel to the Dark Souls games in the sense that it's not just about progressing your character like you do normally in RPGs, and there are stats, like you get better at stats like combat stats and stuff like that. But there is a component with the combat system where you get more skilled at the game. You know, it can be really intimidating and annoying for some people with a combat system, which I know people have problems with, but there is something to be said about you just getting better at the combat system. You know, it's like when you fight three people, it is difficult because, like, you know, in this kind of realistic situation, fighting three people would be difficult. But not only do you get better from your stats, but you kind of get better with yourself and you get better at the combat system. And so, you know, there's something that's a parallel to that with like Dark Souls where you get better at the game, you get better at fighting the boss. And so I think Kingdom Come Deliverance has a lot of those parallels. But anyways, the game is kind of a little bit more of a grounded story. It kind of doesn't have this kind of grandiose epicness to the story. It's a lot more grounded in kind of realism. But that's kind of the charm of Kingdom Come Deliverance. It just really nails that medieval aesthetic and you really feel immersed in the world. And it's got a great soundtrack. And, you know, I can see it now. Like, you know, I keep saying that these games have great soundtracks, but I really do mean it. It really nails that medieval aesthetic with its soundtrack. And it's just got a really fun and cool world and just got great role-playing aspects with playing the main character. Now, that being said though, I do understand why people have problems with this game and the second game, and I'm going to try to dispel some of those problems or to maybe get you to give this game a second chance or to convince you to maybe try this game out. So the first problem that people have is with the save system. So you basically need these potions to save the game, or you need to go to a bed and save there. And so a lot of people don't like that idea, especially if they play for 45 minutes. They don't want to lose their progress, and so they go, this is not fun. But in a lot of ways, I think that what that does is it challenges you to think about your decisions. It kind of actually enhances the role-playing aspect in many ways, because it's like, oh, if you get into a dangerous combat encounter and you weren't prepared for it, kind of makes you assess risk in a little bit of a different way. But let's say you want to sidestep that. Well, there's like two ways I think you can sidestep it in a way. So the first is with mods. There is mods to kind of get rid of this kind of savior schnapp, which is the save potion mechanic. But let's say you're playing on console or you don't really have access to mods. Another way to really kind of get around this, which is really not that hard, is through alchemy. So in alchemy, you can actually make the save potions and you actually don't need to know the recipe. And there's a couple of places that aren't really too far away from the main city where you can get the ingredients to then make the potions. Or you can actually, I think, buy the ingredients off of some of the merchants. And so if you actually just get a perfect crafting for the potions and you just spend a little bit of time crafting the potions, you can make enough save potions to the point where it really doesn't even matter. And this is true for both the first game and the second game. So either with mods or with just getting some alchemy and getting the ingredients and making a bunch of save potions, you can really just sidestep this whole mechanic and you really don't have to worry about it. But like I said, I think it does add some realism and some engagement to the game. But like I said, if you think it's a problem and it's annoying, you can get around it. It's really not that hard with using alchemy. So I wouldn't let that dissuade you. And you can do this pretty early in the game too. So it's not like this is a late game strategy. And then the second thing that I think people get thrown off is the combat system. Now, the combat system does have its flaws with both the first and second game, but I think the thing is that you have to treat the combat system with a little bit more patience. I think a lot of people, they're really used to kind of just going in and hacking and slashing and not thinking about things, and you have to be a little bit more patient. You have to be a little bit slower paced with how you approach a combat encounter. But in both the games too, there's something you can do. So there's a trainer in the first game that's right outside the main city. Captain Bernard, I think is his name, where you can train with him. And then of course, with training with him, you'll get better at your skills at the sword or the various weapons. And you'll also get used to the combat system in general. And you can just spend as much time as you want there. And when you get to that point in the game, which is pretty early on, I would actually encourage you to spend some time training with Captain Bernard just to get in the flow of the combat system and also maybe level up your skills a bit. And so that is enough to really make the game a lot more enjoyable, and to get more comfortable with the combat system really does throw a lot of people off. And then you can actually do the same thing in the second Kingdom Come Deliverance game. There is a similar trainer in a camp close to the beginning of the game where you can do this idea as well. And so I would say that take those two things into consideration, because in my opinion, those are the two big things that throw people off to liking this game or enjoying these games. And so there might be other complaints. I think that A third complaint is that, like I said, it's a little bit more grounded. It's not like there's this crazy epic moment, adrenaline, go, go, go all the time. But I think that's part of the charm of the game and why it resonates with a lot of people where they want kind of these more grounded RPGs. And so if you're looking for something that I think is a little bit more grounded as an RPG, it's got a little bit more of this just kind of, I don't know, something different than I think some of the modern RPGs that are out there, you might really enjoy Kingdom Come Deliverance. And I wouldn't let those two things stop you. Now, like I said, you could start off with the second Kingdom Come Deliverance, but I would really suggest you try out the first one, really like the first one, and I think you'll actually appreciate the second one better if you play the first one. And to be honest with you, I don't even think really going back to the first one is really that bad. It's not like the first one is so dated compared to the second game. And if you're going to try these games out, try out Kingdom Come Deliverance 1 or the first game before trying the second one. And really, it is an awesome game. If you just take it slow and you keep those two things that I said in mind, I think you'll have a great time, especially if you're a big RPG gamer or you had trouble getting into them. Try those things out that I suggested and would highly recommend it. This is an awesome RPG, super immersive, great soundtrack, great characters. You can have a ton of fun with it. I mean, they're both games you can get so many hours out of, and so I would really highly recommend them. All right, and so next up, we have a really unique game series, and that is the Legend of Heroes Trails series, and in particular, the Legend of Heroes Trails in the Sky. So this is definitely not for everyone, and probably I would only recommend this if you're a hardcore JRPG gamer, just because these games are really slow, but they're very, very, very unique. So there's a bunch of games in this series that have been going on for a number of years, and what makes them very unique is that it's a continuous story that plays out throughout multiple games. There's a ton of world building that's been happening throughout all the games in the series. There's returning characters, there's these returning broader story elements, and that's very unique when it comes to video games. Now, you have things like Gears of War or Halo or something like that where there is a continued story, but this is basically like if you had the Final Fantasy games, but everything is continuing the story, the world building, and all those things. And so it makes it very unique. And so if you are really into JRPGs, you maybe have heard of this series. And so that whole story element in this kind of continued lore across, 10 plus games is very intriguing and engaging for a lot of people. Now, that being said, though, these games are very, very slow. And when I mean that they're slow, they're very, 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 very slow. I think that they would test just about any patient gamer out there. And they're very much, I guess, focused on kind of this idea of like a slice of life kind of subgenre and within anime or manga. So there's a lot of world building. There's a lot of character development where not much is really happening. And this is very true in the first game in the series, The Legend of Heroes Trails in the Sky, FC, which is the first chapter. And they kind of operate in these different arcs, essentially, that kind of take place in different parts of the universe of the world. But there's a lot of this, like I said, slice of life elements to things, which people really appreciate and they love over time. And so, one thing that's really unique about these games is you have these random NPCs, like the NPCs that maybe you see in like a Final Fantasy game or something like that. But it's a little bit different in this game where these like sub NPCs that are just like in these towns and stuff have continuous storylines that have progressed throughout all the games in the series. And so that's like wild to think about because most of the time when you think about that dialogue, it's just totally filler, doesn't matter. Now there is some of that, but people love those like NPC storylines that have continued throughout multiple games as much as like the main game itself, which is kind of crazy to be honest with you. And so it makes it really unique where people will talk to every single NPC, and when there's like a story event, that dialogue will refresh. And like there's a ton of dialogue in these games. And so you can imagine with all this dialogue, there's a ton of world building and a ton of character development that happens. And so a lot of people like that, but it makes the games very slow paced. And when you first start playing these games, you don't really have that emotional connection, I suppose, that people have when they've played like 7 games in the series. And so that's like the tough obstacle with the Legend of Heroes series. And so, especially with the first game of the series, Trails in the Sky, FC, it's very much a slow-paced story. I mean, there is a lot of times where nothing is going on. And so I think a lot of people have tried this game and they go, I just don't get it. It's just so slow. Nothing is going on. But I think that for some people, there's a moment where it clicks and then they start really caring and they start talking to every single person in the entire game and getting a broader understanding of the world and the universe. And unfortunately, the first game is very, very slow in that regards. It definitely picks up in the second game, Trails in the Sky second chapter, but it is very, very slow. And so I would say that is the biggest obstacle. And like I said, it's enough to turn away most people, even hardcore JRPG fans. And so that's like the biggest obstacle. But if you can somehow have that patience and overcome that, you have a series that is very, very unique and awesome in so many ways. It's got a phenomenal soundtrack. I mean, all the games in the series have top tier soundtracks. I mean, I would put them on the same level as the Final Fantasy games. I think that generally speaking, the Trails games have a better soundtrack than the Final Fantasy games, and that's saying something. That might be slightly controversial, but I'm just trying to kind of frame something here where the music in these games are awesome in every single one of them. And, the first game in the series has a battle theme that's kind of got this really unique jazz theme, and it's like awesome. So got this awesome battle theme. And actually the final boss fight in the second Trails in the Sky game has got this awesome boss fight. It might be like the best final boss theme of all time, like even maybe better than the final boss theme in Final Fantasy VI. So, I mean, the music in these games are awesome, and people absolutely love the characters. There's so many characters in these games. I mean, like there's so many characters. It gets crazy. And a lot of people like the broader story that's happening in the universe. There is definitely a lot of, I guess, typical Japanese tropes and stuff that people don't necessarily like. But then also what makes this game kind of very unique, or these games very unique, is the combat system. And I would actually say that the Legend of Heroes Trail series have a very interesting and engaging combat system. So many JRPGs, especially turn-based JRPGs, suffer from this idea where you just kind of like auto battle like Pokemon or something, and you just auto win, and you just like maybe are challenged at the boss fights and that's it. But the battles, at least in Trails in the Sky and the earlier games, basically have this kind of grid-based combat where your positioning matters. And then you have magic in the game, and then you have like ability points. And so like if you play on some of the harder difficulties, which I actually would suggest if you like play on hard at least, that the fights can be very fun and engaging, and they can be kind of difficult, but that's kind of like different and unique because most Japanese like role-playing games, most JRPGs, you don't even think about it. Like if you play Final Fantasy VII, you just kind of auto attack to the end. And with Trails, you have to kind of think about it. And some of the bosses can be very difficult. It really has this awesome, engaging combat system. And so when you kind of put it all together, you have this really engaging combat system. You have this crazy world building that's going on. You have a great cast of characters. You have, this continuous story. You have awesome music. But as I said, it's definitely not for everyone just because these games are very slow paced. And it's not just like the first game in the series. All of them very much focus on this kind of slice of life dynamic and are very slow paced, especially the first games in the series. And so it's enough to turn most people away, as well as just the Japanese tropes that go along with these games as well. And some people would actually maybe say you can start with Trails from Zero, which is like a following arc beyond Sky, because I think in some respects, some people would say that that's more interesting than the Sky arc. But the thing is, if you don't start from the very beginning, you lose context because there's returning characters, there's returning story elements that people absolutely love and appreciate that you see in the game as it develops over time. And so this is really one of those things where if you play the earlier games in the series, you'll appreciate the other games in the later arcs. And so while you can start in different places, I think a lot of people would suggest starting at the very beginning, which is Trails in the Sky. But like I said, there is this low-paced nature to it that makes it very difficult. So if you're really into JRPGs and you really want something very different, check out the Legend of Heroes series, or if you're just looking for something very different from a video game perspective, like I said, this very continuous story element and just kind of all these very unique elements, awesome soundtrack, it might be worth checking out the Legend of Heroes series. But like I said, it's definitely not for everyone. They're very slow paced, but for the right person, you might really enjoy it. All right, for the next one, it's going to be a super popular one, so I apologize for that. But I'm going to recommend the Mass Effect series, and in particular, starting with Mass Effect 1. Now, I was also tempted to not put this one on the list, and I get it. It's just because this is an extremely popular video game series, an extremely popular RPG series. And if you like RPGs, you've probably played the Mass Effect series. But regardless, I think there are some people out there that have not played Mass Effect. And so if you haven't, I wanted to recommend it. And if you're really into RPGs and you haven't played Mass Effect, definitely should give it a try. Now, in some ways, I am conflicted with recommending Mass Effect just because the ending of Mass Effect 3, which is the third game in the series, is so bad. It feels like such a betrayal that in so many ways, it's just so hard to want to recommend the Mass Effect series, just knowing how it goes. kind of reminds me of the ending of Game of Thrones, which I also don't think is very good. And so you can also make another parallel to the Dragon Age series with the recent release of, or somewhat recent release of Dragon Age Veilguard. Now, that being said, it's like, well, that's kind of a weird way to try to pitch Mass Effect. But still, regardless, I do think that these are very fun games. And so I will look past the ending of Mass Effect 3, which I really don't like. There's actually a internet theory that started around when the game was originally released. I think it's called the indoctrination theory. And I think that's kind of like my headcanon for the game. So if you actually go with that, it actually is okay. But regardless, why should you play the Mass Effect series? Well, the Mass Effect series is an awesome series. It's got a phenomenal story, except for the last 10 minutes of the game. And it's got a great cast of characters. It's got phenomenal world building in it, and a very fun and engaging combat system. And I really like the Mass Effect series in so many different ways. My favorite character in the entire series is Garrus. You know, Mass Effect is just so well done in terms of the characters, in terms of the dialogue, in terms of the role playing and all those things. And I really wish that Mass Effect would get to a better state because there's so much amazing potential of the Mass Effect series. I actually did a video on this if you're curious. I'll link that up above or in the description if you're interested. But the Mass Effect series is just a very well done RPG. A lot of people's favorite Mass Effect is probably the second game, but actually I really like the first one. And so obviously you should start with the first Mass Effect. If you enjoy it, you'll like the second one and the third one and kind of go on from there. They're definitely not perfect. I mean, I do think that they kind of changed the RPG mechanics as they went and progressed throughout the games, but the combat system did improve. But I won't speak too much on Mass Effect. I just think that if you haven't played the series, you should definitely give it a try, just because I think you can have a lot of fun with it. And if you've never played these games, definitely worth checking out, just like a lot of these old classics that I've suggested throughout this video, like Dragon Age Origins and stuff. They're all really awesome games. They have awesome casts of characters. And hey, let me know who is your favorite character in the entire Mass Effect series. Mine is Garrus. I'd be curious to see where everyone stands on that. But yes, definitely check Mass Effect out. It's a great game series, and it's worth playing despite the problems with its ending. All right, and so next I wanted to recommend a story game and an FPS game, and that is Metro 2033. Now, this is a great game. It is extremely immersive. I really enjoyed playing Metro 2033. And so, like I said with this video, I wanted to kind of recommend a wide variety of video games that are going to rejuvenate you, to just give you a great and awesome time. And if you're looking for something a little bit more story-based, more in the kind of FPS side of things, I would highly suggest Metro 2033. It's got this really immersive world that takes place in the post-apocalyptic side of things in these subways. And it's just so immersive. It just really nails that aesthetic. And it's kind of got this horror element to it with these kind of monsters and just kind of this grimy atmosphere. But then it's also kind of got this great first-person shooter story aesthetic to it. And there's actually other Metro games after this, which you can definitely play if you like the first one. But I would actually suggest you start with the first one, because then I think you'll appreciate the other games in the series. And like I said, it's just got a great atmosphere. And so if you're just kind of looking for something that is just of this kind of vein, and this just seems very interesting, I would definitely consider checking it out. And it kind of reminds me in a lot of ways of the Stalker game. So like Stalker, Shadow of Chernobyl. So if you like that game and you haven't played Metro 2033, you might like this. Or if you do like Metro 2033, you might consider checking out Stalker, even though it is a very different game. But they're kind of a similar post-apocalyptic aesthetic. And so if you're looking for something very immersive, just kind of more story-based, definitely check out this game. All right, and so the next game that I'm going to recommend, a lot of people absolutely love this game, including myself, and it's kind of like a 2-for-1, honestly. And so there's kind of 2 entry points that you could pick from, but I'm going to suggest Mountain Blade Warband. Now, some people would suggest maybe Mountain Blade 2 Bannerlords, which is basically the same game in a lot of ways with just kind of an updated graphic system. They share a lot of similarities, but I kind of like the old school classic of Warband, but honestly, I wouldn't really fault you for playing Bannerlord either. Go with either, play both. They're kind of like the same game, to be honest with you. And so these are really fun RPGs, and in a lot of ways, they kind of remind me of Kenshi in a sense, because they have their faults. You kind of almost wish that these games, Warband and Bannerlord, had more content in them. and or they were a little bit more polished. But despite their flaws, kind of like Kenshi, they're a lot of fun. They're a ton of fun. And so basically, you have kind of a character. And like I said, when it comes to Warband and Bannerlord, they're basically so similar that I can kind of speak to both of them in the same vein in a sense. But you basically start with a character and you have various stats. So you can get better at like leadership skills or certain combat abilities and stuff like that. And you can recruit an army. And so then with those armies, you can train them to be better or more skilled. And then you kind of acquire better loot and better armor. And eventually you kind of like work towards kind of being this just, I guess, general and slash army and being a general. And usually what ends up happening is there's all these different factions fighting on the map. And so sometimes you'll join them, you'll join their side and you'll help them to try to conquer various parts of the map. Or at some point you might try to form your own kingdom where you have your own castles, you have your own cities, and you have different generals that join your side and stuff like that. And what's fun about this game too is that in addition to kind of the campaign map where you're going and trying to basically buy new gear and get more money, there's kind of these like real-time combats. You're in these big battles with a bunch of your soldiers, and it's like a lot of fun. And then there's like these siege battles that are also a ton of fun. And so if you've never played these games before, it's definitely worth checking out. You can have a lot of fun with them despite their flaws and despite a lot of people, including myself, wishing that they had more content. So if you're okay with a game that kind of has a couple problems, you wish it had a little bit more content, I think you can have a lot of fun with both Warband and Bannerlord. Now, I can't speak to this completely, but a lot of people also like the multiplayer in these games. I have not really played too much of the multiplayer in Bannerlord, but I have seen these really cool YouTube videos where these people kind of go into these really big, huge multiplayer battles. And so if you're really into kind of, I guess, some of these more multiplayer communities, maybe that's something that you can get involved with. I can't really speak to how that exactly works, but if that's something that, you know, sounds interesting when you look at these kind of real-time combat battles and every single person is like a player and they kind of go into these kind of coordinated battles, that could be a ton of fun. Now, like I said, I have not played the multiplayer in these games, so I can't speak to that. But that might be another selling point for you wanting to check out these games. But I've had so much fun playing Warband and Bannerlord despite their flaws, and a lot of people absolutely love them. I mean, when I think about RPGs, I wish we had more games like this, fleshed it out with even more content, with more polish. I feel like that's what we need in this RPG genre and stuff like that. And so when some of these modern RPGs just aren't doing it for you, or some of these kind of modern games, they just feel very sterile and they just feel like the same. You know, check out some of these other games like Warband, Bannerlord. There's a kind of other game that I would also recommend, Fire and Sword, which kind of has more of a Renaissance angle to things. So they're all worth checking out and playing. Like I said, if you want to kind of go a little bit more old school, check out Warband, or if you want the kind of more newer with some slight improvements and some graphics, check out Bannerlord. Really fun games. Definitely check them out. It's an interesting game that you can maybe have a ton of fun with. Okay, and now I wanted to recommend Orcs Must Die, and this is an extremely fun game. And so when I'm talking about recommendations of just having a ton of fun and just being rejuvenating, this is a great game for that. It's just pure fun. And it's this tower defense game with a twist on it where you play as a character, and so you're kind of participating in the battle as well. So normally with tower defense games, you're just kind of watching your traps do the work, but in this game, you're actively participating. And this is just a ton of fun. There's all these different levels that you basically try to beat with various traps and different ways to go about it. And then once you beat the game, you can try to beat the game on harder difficulties to not let any orcs pass through your portals. And that's the general gist of the game. This game is just oozing pure fun, and it's really lighthearted. It's kind of got this humorous element to it. And if you like Orcs Must Die, there's actually other games in the series, but I do think the first one is the best in the series. The later games kind of move into this kind of more co-op element of things, and I think it messes the balance up a little bit. You can definitely play them solo. I never played these games co-op, and so you can definitely do it, but I think it does hurt the game just a little bit. But I also think that in the later games, there's less of a reliance on traps and definitely more emphasis on your power as the player doing a lot of the work. But that doesn't take away from the games being fun. Definitely play the other Orcs Must Die games if you like the first one. But like I said, I think the first one is the best, and you can have a ton of fun with it. And of course, if you like this, the other games are also worth playing. So if you're looking for something just kind of lighthearted, check out this game. It's so good. Okay, and so next I wanted to give an MMORPG recommendation. And so this is kind of my MMORPG section of the video because I know that there's a lot of MMO players that really hate the state of the MMORPG genre. There's a lot of games that have kind of gone in the wrong direction, or they just love to see a revitalization of the MMO or going back to that old school MMO dynamic. And there's a lot of MMOs we could pick on this list. And, there's a lot of different directions you can go down. And I'll talk about MMOs kind of more broadly, but I did want to recommend two specifically that I think are MMOs that kind of probably best embody more of that old school MMO feeling if you're trying to seek that out or you miss that or something like that. So bear with me on these, but we'll try to talk about a couple of other MMOs as well. And so my first recommendation in terms of the MMO world would be old school RuneScape, OSRS. Now, here's the thing. So some people are really opinionated on this game. I will fully admit that there is a lot to not like about OSRS, but maybe I can try to convince you to maybe give this game a try, especially if you've never played RuneScape. Now, there's different versions of RuneScape, but I think that old school RuneScape, OSRS, based off of RuneScape 2, is probably the best embodiment of kind of this old school MMO feel, or it's one of the better ones in my opinion. Over time, it's kind of added new features and new content into the game. But I think that old school RuneScape, it really does feel in a lot of ways like the old MMO spirit in so many different ways. And so with old school RuneScape definitely has its problems, but in a lot of ways, I do like a lot of things that the game has to offer. So the first thing is that there's a great sense of progression. And so there's a lot of different ways to progress your character. And I think this is kind of missing in some respects with MMORPGs, but you can progress your character with skills. You can progress your character with earning money or getting better gear. There's bossing to progress in. There's PvP. There's all these different ways to progress, which I think really does feel like the kind of more old school MMO feeling to things. And I think for a lot of people too that maybe played OSRS or played RuneScape back in the day, something that they can also do that really revitalizes the game is if they play on Iron Man mode, which is basically you having to craft all the gear yourself. You're not really relying on the traditional kind of systems within the game, but instead you are crafting and kind of playing the game a little bit on a hardcore mode in a way. And I think that that makes the game very different, and it almost kind of feels like a fresh experience in a lot of ways, especially for people that used to play RuneScape back in the day. Now you kind of actually see this with World of Warcraft as well, with some of the kind of equivalent versions of this. But I think that on top of that, one thing that I really like about RuneScape is there's this kind of constant sense of progression no matter where you are on the cycle, right? There's gear that's constantly relevant for various parts of the game. It's not like you kind of just obsolete gear. There's a long progression path in terms of progressing with bosses or with progressing with gear. And there is a level of, I guess, mystery to the world, especially if you haven't played RuneScape. Now, that being said, though, RuneScape is definitely not for everyone. I mean, this is probably one of the most grindy MMOs out there in terms of trying to get to like level 99 on skills and stuff like that. And it's a very, I think, passive game. And so I don't think that appeals to everyone, but for the right gamer, I think it really can appeal to people, whether it's just chilling and hanging out with skills or something like that. And then in addition to that, I think that the graphics sometimes throw people off, or the combat system, although there is kind of a little bit of hidden depth behind the combat system in RuneScape. If you kind of just look at it from a high level, really does seem like there's not much to it, but there's a very detailed system with the PvP in the game, with bossing and stuff like that. So I wouldn't really write that off as well. And I also am one of those people that really likes the concept of the wilderness in old school RuneScape. There's these kind of high stake PvP encounters. And so if you're looking for an MMO that might kind of revitalize that old school spirit of the MMORPG, and you want to give something a try, I would probably recommend old school RuneScape. And like I said, I know there's a lot of people that don't really like the game, but I do think that it can fill that for a lot of people, especially too if you've never played it. It could be really interesting just kind of exploring all these things for the first time. But I will say that OSRS is extremely grindy, so just be forewarned about that. And at the same time too, I would also say that the quests in this game are extremely hard. You kind of need a guide. I mean, they are very different than your typical MMORPG. But like I said, I think that RuneScape has its charms to it. It has its pluses. And if you're just looking for something different, I would definitely check it out. For the second MMO, I want to suggest EVE Online. Now, I'm tempted to not suggest EVE Online just because I haven't played EVE Online in a while. And so my experience is still based off of the past, but I have looked at it a little bit, somewhat recently. But what I like about EVE Online is it just, I feel like, is still this kind of game that is unabashedly itself, and it has maintained that identity over time. And so with EVE Online, there is this kind of high stakes nature to it where if you lose your ship, you lose your ship, especially too where stakes get even higher in nullsec or kind of like lawless space if you're not really familiar with EVE Online. And there's a lot of progression with the game. I think that its style of leveling up skills when you're kind of not playing the game is something that is appealing to some people. That kind of concept almost appeals to a certain type of person in a way. But I also understand how that is not very attractive for a lot of people as well. But you can have such amazing experiences with EVE Online. And I think that EVE Online also, assuming you kind of go in this direction, has a great social component with it, especially when you go into nullsec and stuff like that. With so many MMOs kind of going down the solo route and this theme park style, I think EVE Online still kind of embodies that MMO experience. But a lot of people, they get chewed out by EVE Online just because there's a lot of things to learn. If you don't go into the game with a plan, you run into a lot of problems. I think it really helps if you try to socialize and play with other people rather than playing solo. And so, like I said, I haven't played EVE Online in a while, so maybe this is not the greatest recommendation ever, but I think the best way to kind of go into EVE Online is to go in with a plan. Because when you go into EVE Online without a plan of what you want to do, you start running into problems. So maybe you want to go into nullsec and do lawless warfare. Maybe you want to kind of go into wormholes. Maybe you want to go into mining, something like that. I think it helps to just have some sort of rough plan going in. And then I also think it helps to just really try to be social with that game because it's just very intimidating for a lot of people. And there's just so many different ways to play. And that's what I like about EVE Online. I mean, I've done a lot of things over the years with EVE Online, whether it's wormholes. I mean, I've had these crazy stories where I'm with one of my friends and we're in this kind of tense battle and we're just trying to get out of the wormhole and it's every man for themselves and we're just trying to get out and hopefully that wormhole doesn't collapse behind you. Or I've kind of played a little bit more passively where you're kind of playing the markets and there's a whole, system with just trying to do trading and that whole dynamic of the game. And so there's a lot of, I think, core MMO aspects that people might be seeking in EVE Online, but it's just some of those other obstacles I think get in the way of people experiencing it. So if I had to suggest two MMOs to check out, I would suggest Old School RuneScape and EVE Online. And like I said, I haven't played EVE Online in a while, so just keep that in mind in terms of that recommendation. But that being said, I do fully admit that there's probably other MMOs out there that people might really enjoy. And if you feel really passionate about an MMO that you want to recommend, especially for kind of more of these MMO players that don't like the state of the MMO RPG industry, definitely leave a comment below. Talk about maybe the MMO that you would recommend and why you think it would be a great fit. I played a lot of MMOs over time. I mean, those are the two that I would probably recommend now. Now, I also love World of Warcraft, and so a lot of people would probably recommend classic World of Warcraft. And the thing about it is, I just think classic World of Warcraft is very different than the original experience in 2004. And so I think you can have a great time with that and you can enjoy it, but it's just a very different experience. And so, some people would recommend that, or they would recommend like the hardcore servers on World of Warcraft or something like that. I totally understand it. I'm probably biased in terms of recommending that choice. It's kind of like Old School RuneScape in a way, but I think that Old School RuneScape has done really well in terms of expanding the content and stuff like that. So some people would say that. Of course, other people would recommend Final Fantasy XIV. That's kind of a more story-driven game. And so I think that either resonates with you or it doesn't resonate with you. But I don't know if it fits that MMO itch that some people want. I've also said that Star Wars Old Republic, some of the single-player stories can be worth playing if you just kind of go through them and it's a lot of fun. But in terms of the MMO experience, I don't know if it fits everyone's needs either. And then, of course, another MMO that I've heard great things about, and I have played it a long time ago, is actually Lord of the Rings Online. Now, just keep this in mind that I have not played this game in so long. I mean, played it really long time ago, but apparently there's a lot of single player story elements with that can be really fun, even though the game is very, very old and I don't know what the player base and stuff looks like. If I had to suggest, like I said, me personally, I would say check out Old School RuneScape or EVE Online if you're looking for that MMO experience. But of course, some of the MMOs that I mentioned, some people would suggest those as well. There are maybe, one or two MMO projects that are kind of in development right now that are really interesting, but we'll have to see how that goes and how that plays out, to be honest with you. And I love MMORPGs. I really do wish that they would be in a better state, but they have been, in my opinion, really contaminated by a lot of these kind of modern dynamics within the video game industry. Culture has changed in a lot of ways. And so as a result, the MMO genre has kind of suffered, and that's unfortunate. But if you are trying to seek something out that's kind of like that, my personal recommendation, like I said, is old school RuneScape and EVE Online. But like I said, there are some other alternatives, but that's what I would have to say about that. Maybe some of the new MMO offerings that are coming out soon will eventually be released and they'll be great, but we'll just have to wait and see. But like I said, let me know what you would suggest on the MMO side. I wanted to kind of just talk about MMOs just a little bit, just because I know that there's a lot of people really frustrated at this genre. And so that would be my 2 personal picks on that side of things. Okay, and next up on the list is a series that is very popular, and it is the Persona series. And in particular, Persona 5 would be my recommendation. Now, I think that a lot of people, they look at Persona and they go, I don't understand it. This is not for me. I don't get it. I'm not really into JRPGs or anything like that, and so why would I play this? Well, I would suggest that you give these games a try, and I really do think that Persona 5 is a great entry point into the series. And here's the thing about the Persona games. I get it. I think a lot of people look at this and they go, I don't understand it. You know, playing as a Japanese high school student, there's kind of this basically weirdness to it with the combat system and this kind of magic side of things. And I would say don't let that dissuade you. Give this game a try and just see if it's for you, because a lot of people really love the Persona games. And I don't think that they're really typical Japanese role-playing game players. I don't think they're typical JRPG gamers. And you might be pleasantly surprised. I mean, people really like the stories or the themes that go with these games. People love the characters in these games. There's these kind of confidant side stories that are going on throughout the game. And you basically spend an entire year kind of as, like I said, a Japanese high school student, but there's kind of like this mystical element that goes with it. And because you spend all these days basically playing the game with these characters, you kind of get like a lot of character building in these games. And then, like I said, there's these kind of like side confidant storylines that are very engaging that covers a bunch of different characters. And also these games have amazing music. I mean, they have awesome soundtracks, every single one of them. Persona 3, 4, 5, etc. And so if you like music and video games, these have awesome soundtracks, especially like the battle theme in Persona 5, Last Surprise. It's just like an awesome battle theme. People like the stories, people like the characters, and honestly, the combat system is a lot of fun. It's a turn-based combat system, and you know, it's just really engaging, and it's just like a ton of fun, to be honest with you. And so everyone kind of has their favorite Persona games, but I think that Persona 5 is probably the most polished of the bunch. And so if you're going to try out a game, start there. And these games are pretty long. I'd say that they kind of go about like maybe, I don't know, 50 to 100 hours probably. It depends on how fast you go, but probably more on the closer to the 100-hour side. And so, you know, give these games a try. I know that like you look at this and you go, I just don't get it. I mean, and I think that's what a lot of people think, but a lot of people just are pleasantly surprised when it comes to this. There's a lot of interesting like characters and stories and all those things as well. And if you like Persona 5, you're almost certainly going to like the other Persona games. And so Persona 3 and Persona 4, there is a Persona 1 and 2, but they're very dated, I guess. And so I would say most people probably haven't played those games, to be honest with you. But these games just have wonderful soundtracks. And, you know, some people like the cast of characters in Persona 3 more than Persona 5, or they like some of the soundtracks in the other games or the story or stuff like that. But start with Persona 5. I think that's like the easiest approachable way to get into the series, just because 3 and 4 kind of have problems with their combat systems. Now, I know that 3 was kind of recently remade, but, you know, I can't speak to the new updated version. But yeah, I mean, check these games out. I mean, they're very popular for a reason. And so I think that as far as JRPGs are concerned, they're actually quite approachable games. That and Chrono Trigger and Final Fantasy are really just kind of probably the best entry points into this genre. And so you might be pleasantly surprised and get so many hours out of these games. And it's kind of interesting too, because if you actually look at the original Persona 3 intro, like the PlayStation 2 intro, it kind of just shows you like what games almost like used to be like in a way, because that intro is so artistic. I mean, it's so like artsy in such a way. And I don't even see how you could have like an intro like that nowadays in so many respects. It's just so different. I don't know. It just shows like this kind of side of video games that used to be a lot more artistic. And so going back to Persona 5, you might not like these games. I get it. It's just kind of the JRPG side of things. give it a try if you're willing to. If you want to just try something different, you might be pleasantly surprised with these games. All right, and the next game that I wanted to recommend, it is so popular. It is ultra popular. A lot of people have probably played it, but I still wanted to recommend it just because I think a lot of people could get enjoyment out of it if they do play it or they haven't played it, and it is Undertale. And yes, I know that so many people have played this game and recommended this game, and so I think some people might be wondering, why are you recommending this game? Well, I think that there are still people out there that have not played this game, and I think that you should give it a try if you haven't. Undertale is this RPG indie game that just has a lot of charm and passion put into it. It's got a phenomenal soundtrack, and I know I keep saying that in all of these games, and I guess I really like video game music, but Undertale has a phenomenal soundtrack from start to finish, and it's got a great cast of characters. There's awesome characters, and the gameplay is really, really, really fun. Just trying to kind of dodge all the projectiles flown at you, and the overall story is really compelling and interesting, and it's really not too long of a game, but there's a reason why people absolutely love Undertale, and I think that as a gamer, you should just give it a try. I think that some people don't like Undertale, and I get it, but a lot of people really do love it, and so if you haven't played it, I think you should just give it a try. When I first played Undertale, I didn't really know anything about it. I just heard that a lot of people kept praising the game, and so I said, okay, well, I'm going to go play Undertale. And then when I played it, it was amazing. It was awesome. I really liked it. Now, like I said, some people don't like Undertale, but it is very popular for a reason. And so if you haven't played this game, it's just one of those games that when so many people praise it, I think that it's worth checking out, and I think that it's very approachable to a lot of different people. But that's all I'll say about Undertale. I don't want to really kind of go into it too much, just because I think if you go into it not really knowing anything, and you'll have a better experience. But if you're looking for something fun and unique, and something that might really bring you an awesome, rejuvenating, and fun and great time, check out Undertale. I would highly recommend it. Okay, and then I wanted to recommend another really popular video game, and a lot of people have probably recommended this one as well, but I wanted to recommend Vampire Survivors, and this might be the same thing as Undertale. It's like, why are you recommending this game? Well, I still think that there are people that haven't played this game, and it is very fun. I mean, it is very simple. The graphics are very old school, but for whatever reason, it is just a very fun game, and the game has added a ton of content over time, and so if you haven't played Vampire Survivors, I mean, I'm sure that the game is even more enjoyable than just kind of when the game first came out. And so I think you could just have a lot of fun with it. It's basically where you have a character and you upgrade different weapons and you just try to last into the very end of the level. And it's just a lot of fun. There's really nothing too crazy to it. Got a very fun gameplay loop, and I think that for a lot of people, it's just very calming and relaxing in a way. Even though it is a little hectic and chaotic, it's just something about it is just very fun and satisfying, at least to me, and I think a lot of other people. And so if you're just looking for something a little bit just, you know, kind of more on the fun side of things, and it's just kind of more like pure, just random video game fun, check out Vampire Survivors. If you already have played Vampire Survivors, a good game that you actually might like as well is called Halls of Torment, which is like Vampire Survivors, but it's kind of got like this Diablo aesthetic to it. And it's kind of adds a little bit more dynamics to the game. There's a lot of games that have been obviously inspired by Vampire Survivors, but you know, one game that I would recommend is Halls of Torment if you've already played Vampire Survivors. But regardless, yep, check out this game if you haven't played it. You might really enjoy it. It's just kind of just a random fun indie game. Okay, and so next up on the list, I'm really excited about this one. I really, really like this game and these type of games, and I'm going to recommend to you Warhammer Vermintide 2. Now, here's the thing. Warhammer Vermintide 2 has its problems, okay? I will give you that, and so does Darktide as well, which I would also recommend. And despite their flaws, these games are just a lot of fun. They're kind of like my other recommendations in this video, like Chivalry 2, like Orcs Must Die, just because I think these games are a ton of fun. And if you actually like these games, you can get so many hours of fun out of these games. And it also opens you up to games that are kind of like this. And you might be pleasantly surprised how much you'll get into these games and how much time you'll get into these games. And so, especially too, if you're like a Warhammer fan, these are great games. I think they're just really fun and cool. I'm a big Warhammer person. I love Warhammer and Warhammer 40K. This game is basically you take control of a couple of different heroes, and it's kind of like Left 4 Dead or Left 4 Dead 2, where you basically go through these levels and all these kind of bosses and monsters swarm at you, and you try to survive to the end. And you could just play through the levels on like kind of a normal difficulty and have a good time and get a couple of hours out of the game. But I think that really these games start to shine when you start playing on the harder and harder difficulties. I mean, when you start going into the very high-end difficulties with this game, there becomes like a level of skill that's involved with these games. And it doesn't seem like it just because it seems like you're just slashing and attacking all the time, but there really is some skill involved with these games, and that's really where the fun starts. It's not just like playing through the levels. I mean, it's cool to just go through that and to be immersed in the Warhammer world, but really it's that higher difficulty level that's just a ton of fun. And so obviously a lot of content has been added over time, and so I would really suggest this game if you're a Warhammer fan or you just want pure fun. I mean, it is just really awesome as a game, and like I said, you can get so many hours, but I would definitely say to get the most out of these games, you want to try to beat them on the hardest difficulties, and obviously you play multiplayer and not just with bots. It's just a ton of fun. I mean, it really is. And like I said, it just really also does the Warhammer aesthetic really, really well. I love Warhammer. I think actually, maybe it's not my favorite faction, but I really like the Skaven. I mean, the rat people, they're just awesome. I mean, they're so cool. But I would probably say my favorite faction is the Dark Elves in Warhammer Fantasy, that is. But I mean, every faction in fantasy is really awesome, you know. Dark Elves are cool, the Empire's cool, Bretonnia is cool. If you're a big Warhammer Fantasy fan, let me know what your favorite faction is. Like I said, I think that mine is the Dark Elves, and maybe Skaven is number 2, to be honest with you. But there's so many good factions. And if you like Vermintide 2, you might also like Darktide. Now, I do think that Vermintide 2 is better than Darktide, and I love 40K. I'm a big 40K person as well. I'm a big Imperial Guard fan. That's my favorite faction in the series. Astra Militarum, what is that? But yeah, let me know what your favorite 40K faction is, and hopefully it's not Space Marines. You know, that's just the typical answer, right? It's got to be something cool like the Imperial Guard or Tyranids or Orcs or something, right? But basically, Darktide is similar to Vermintide 2, but in the 40K universe, and that also really nails the aesthetic of the 40K universe really well. And it's the same idea, but obviously it's just a little bit different with just some of the ranged mechanics and stuff like that. But you can get a lot of fun out of both of these games. I won't really get into too much of the nuances about what I don't like about Darktide or why Vermintide is a little bit better or whatever. But I think that regardless, like if you like Darktide or Vermintide 2, you'll probably enjoy the other one. You'll get so much time out of these games. And like I said, the most fun in these games, in my opinion, is on the highest difficulties. I mean, that's when things get really chaotic. You're like fighting for your life, and that's where things just get a ton of fun. And there's a skill involved. And of course, with all these games too, you level up your characters, you get gear and stuff like that. So there's like a level of progression with it. But like I said, play these games if you haven't played them. They're really fun. I mean, they really are fun. If you haven't played these kind of style of games like Left 4 Dead, Left 4 Dead 2, they're really fun, and you can get so much time out of them. And I just think that they're really fun. They're just pure fun. And like when I wanted to make this video, I just wanted to pick video games that are going to rejuvenate you, that are going to be just fun and awesome. And I thought to myself, okay, yeah, let's recommend Vermintide 2 because it's just so much fun. It is flawed. It does have its problems. I mean, people will complain about certain mechanics and ideas within these games, and I get it. I totally understand it. It's not a masterpiece 10 out of 10 video game, but is totally fun. And I just think that if you haven't played them, you can have a lot of fun. And that's my goal. I want you to have a great time. I want you to be rejuvenated. And so I'd highly recommend Vermintide 2 or Darktide as well, especially if you're a Warhammer fan. I mean, these are great games. And so they might be some of the best Warhammer-esque games out there. So definitely give these games a try. I think you might have an awesome time playing both these games, but in particular, Vermintide 2. And those are the video games that I wanted to talk about today. There's so many video games that I really wanted to put on this list that I just didn't get a chance to put on this list. But hey, if you could do me 2 quick favors. One, if you found a video game that I didn't mention on this list that you think would be a great recommendation to people, please leave a comment below. It'd be helpful to not only myself, but I think to other people. And I'd love to hear what you have to say. And second, consider liking and subscribing. I make a lot of awesome video game content on my channel. Check it out. And with all that being said, I will see you in the next video.